thank you to our adjudicators who are here this afternoon. We've all been told the rules of what's going to be happening during our debates, but I'll just go over a few important key pieces that we do not want our mobile phones out loud. Please be on silent and please be quiet and respectful during the debates. We ask that you do not leave the room during the debates, as this can cause interruption as well. This first debate will only occur points for Campion College, as their opposition is made up of a support team solely, to provide an even number of teams for the competition. So all points will be going to Campion College. So welcome to our first debate. The motion of the first debate is this House believes Catholic schools should expose students to the teachings of all major religions equally, rather than just the prominent focus of Catholicism. The affirmative team is Campion College, represented by Rosie, Rebecca, and Catalina, sorry, I hope I pronounced that right. And the negating team is the St. John's support team, represented by Bruno, Will, and Dylan. Thank you.
My name's, I should introduce doing a panel for this debate. So I'll be the chair of this debate. My name is Nathaniel.
Hi everybody, my name's Rebecca and I'm the first speaker of the affirming team, and I'm from Campion College. We strongly agree with this moot, being that this House believes that Catholic schools should expose students to the teachings of all major religions equally, rather than just predominantly focusing on Catholicism. With this, we are not saying that we are devaluating the Catholic education, but we are acknowledging other major religions as well. We do not live in a simple world, right? We live in a massive world with millions and billions of people on Earth. Not everyone believes in the same religion. 1 Corinthians 9 verse 20 talks about winning people for God. When Paul is with the Jews, he lives like the Jews, so he can win them for God. How can we be like Paul and win people for God if we don't understand how they live? Jesus loves everyone. He loves everyone no matter their differences, their beliefs, and we believe that learning about these different religions will help us to understand our religion better. God gives us choice for a reason, and if the only religion that we are exposed to is the Catholic religion, how can we make an informed decision to follow Christ as a Catholic for ourselves? If we are not open to what others believe, how can we expect them to be open to what we believe? Jesus teaches us to love. He tells us to love our neighbour as we love ourselves. So if we do not understand how our neighbours live, what our neighbours believe, how can we truly love them for who they are? Learning about people's differences and their choice of belief will also expose us to more dramatic and larger issues that arise with different religions. Okay. from a Catholic school since I was in year 7. I was taught about the Catholic faith. I was taught about the Catholic faith, and I was also exposed through other aspects of life about other different religions that are around in our world. And even though I was exposed to these other religions, I could embrace them and then choose for myself what religion I wanted to follow. I was baptized Anglican as a child and was confirmed Catholic in the Catholic Church when I was in year 8. And even though I was exposed to all of these different religions, I knew that while I was exposed to all of these different religions, I was exposed to all of these different religions from a really early upbringing. And even though I was exposed to these religions, it did not diminish the Catholic perspective. If we teach about the major religions in school, it will broaden our knowledge of everybody in our society, our wider society and our local society. As I said earlier, we cannot expect others to want to learn about Catholicism if we are not open to learning about their beliefs as well. To be like Jesus and to be like God is to embrace everybody, to embrace their differences and to be true to who you believe you are. Whether this is through your hobbies, through the subjects you take in school, deciding who you are for yourself is a huge aspect of going through life. The Catholic Church teaches us to love one another. It teaches us to accept God and to accept Jesus as It teaches us to love God and be with God in our lives, right? So to embrace God truly, we must learn about all of his people, not just the ones that we are surrounded with in Catholic schools. Finally, like I said earlier, how can we expect people to learn about our Catholic religion if we are not open to learning about theirs? This is why, as the Affirming Team, we believe that the MOOC shall stand.
I'd like to thank the first affirming speaker for opening up the debate, and I'd like to welcome up the first speaker for the negating team. Continue with the debate.
Alrighty, to begin my speech as the first negating speaker, I would like to quote Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22, verses 34 to 40. One of the teachers of the law of Moses came up while Jesus and the Sadducees were arguing. When he heard Jesus give a good answer, he asked him, "What is the most important commandment?" Jesus answered, "The most important one says, 'People of Israel, you have only one Lord and God. You must love him with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength.'" I'd like to open this quote as it underpins the nature of our side of the house's argument. Because if we were, as the opposing house argues, to equally expose students to teachings of all major religions opposed to a predominant focus on Catholicism, it would inherently no longer be a Catholic school, as the motion states, directly contradicting and contrasting the sole purpose of a Catholicism and thus the motion. As first speaker, I will be beginning with some rebuttal to the first affirming speaker of the other side of the House and discussing how fundamentally this motion will fall to great depth. My second speaker will be discussing how mechanistically this motion will fall. And my third speaker will be identifying three main points of clash and providing more rebuttal. So I want to start off with some rebuttal. So we heard from the first affirming house that if we were exposing students to the teachings of all major religions, we would not be devaluating the worth of a Catholic education and simply acknowledging what's the harm in doing that. Well, Catholicism is founded upon the teachings of Jesus. And as I open with, Jesus says himself that you are only to have one Lord, one God. And if we are to even simply acknowledge and just expose ourselves to the fact that if there are more than one God, to learn about them and to believe in them, evidently if we want to make our own choice, that would no longer be a Catholic principle and wouldn't be under what a Catholic school is designed to do. We also heard from the other side of the house about winning people for God, and I just wanted to point out how this inherently contradicts the motion, because the motion states that we would expose students to teachings of all major religions rather than a predominant focus on Catholicism. And if we take this idea from the opposing side of the house, that if we are to just expose students to these other religions to get them back to Catholicism, there is still a predominant focus on Catholicism, thus inherently contradicting the motion. This brings me onto my first point about contradictions. So if we take, for example, maybe the four most prominent main religions, Catholicism, Buddhism, Islam, and Hinduism, there is inherently going to be contradictions within these religions that will irrefutably devaluate a Catholic education and thus the actual Catholic role of the Catholic school itself. The only example I can think of an interfaith religion is that of Hinduism. But we take 3 out of those 4, and you look at Islam and you look at Buddhism and you look at Hinduism, they all teach the same thing. We've got at least one or supreme reality or supreme being that you are to put all your effort into, all your focus within that religion, within that area into. And if you don't, then you're not actually, said to, be a part of that religion. If we are a Catholic school, we have to have a predominant focus on Catholicism, because then what is it? It's just a school. What makes us, special character schools and Catholic character schools is simply that we have a predominant focus on Catholicism. If we were to even expose students to other main religions, fundamentally, it would contradict the very role of what a Catholic church is, and that's Catholic school is, and that's about teaching about Catholicism and having a predominant focus on Catholicism. Even if, theologically, like the other house argued that, if we expose our students to more religions and some of those main religions, it would enforce our understanding of Catholicism. I would argue, in our side of the house, would argue that it wouldn't. And my second speaker will further expound on how mechanistically this is impossible. Because even in an ideal world, if we were able to actually equally expose every single, all major religions, it would still be mechanistically, impossible to do so. And as I said, even if theologically, it could enforce, it would fundamentally contradict the teachings of Catholicism and thus detract from the role of a Catholic school. I just wanted to finish off with what Mr. Tong said today, talking about how he doesn't like the term special character. He likes the term Catholic character. And there is a reason why he doesn't like that, is because if you just refer to special character, you're referring to all the different values of special character schools, of religious schools. But we are not simply here today as special character schools, we're here today as Catholic character schools. Thank you.
to thank the first negating speaker for their speech. I'd like to welcome up the affirming side's second speaker to continue the case.
Hi everyone, I'm Catalina from the Affirming Side from Campion College. And first I'm going to start with some rebuttal. So this side said, okay, so the people. Jesus died for all people, not just Catholics. So this brings me to my first point of human dignity. Once a student leaves school, they will be able to recognize that not everyone is Catholic. This can be connected to the Catholic social teaching of human dignity. Human dignity is about recognizing that we are all created in the image of God. It is important that during school we are exposed to a wide range of religions, studying their rituals, beliefs, and values. This is so important because we are able to accept others like God accepts us and our differences. We are all created in the image of God, and it is important that we stand together in solidarity despite our differences. As a Catholic, I would want for other people of other religions to acknowledge and learn and accept my religion, treating others the way you want to be treated. Students should be exposed to different religions because they have some of them have similar values, so students that go to Catholic schools can be open to other perspectives. I want to also connect this to the Catholic social teaching of solidarity. We should be able to stand together as a community despite our differences, and even if we have other religions, we should be able to acknowledge and accept those differences. Again, treating others the way you want to be treated. The people. Jesus died for all people, not just Catholics. This includes all religions because we want to treat others the way you want to be treated, and this is why the mooch shall stand. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the second affirming speaker for the speech. I'd like to welcome up the second negating speaker to continue the debate.
As the second negating speaker, I'd like to first start with some rebuttal, then I will be talking about our points. First, though, I'd like to point out the affirming side's point mostly rests on the fact that this motion will allow better teaching of other religions. The problem that we have with this motion is I have not heard a mechanistic reason why we need to teach all religions equally over why we could not just teach parts of other religions while keeping our Catholic focus. And that's important. As Catholics, we believe that we should spread the good news of Jesus Christ. And if we do, under their model of under their side of the house, they're saying that we need to teach them equally, and I'm going to show where that is fundamentally incompatible with the ability to spread the good word of the Lord. Firstly, I would like to point out schools have not been defined in this motion, and we can begin, and under this motion, we have to teach 5-year-olds the differences between all of the 4 major religions that we've talked about: Catholicism, Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism. If you are a Catholic, this is not okay. Because here's the thing, 5-year-olds are young and impressionable. This is an important time of their lives where they learn lots about the world. And what we're doing is we're confusing them. We're saying, here are 4 different religions that you have no way of knowing the true faith, and instead you have to believe that you're being told these other
POI?
ones. And yes,
Would you not say that by teaching 5-year-olds, as you say, about only the Catholic religion, you're putting into their minds that the Catholic religion is the only true religion?
yes,
Which may not be true?
well, okay. If we agree with your point of clash, or the point of interest, sorry, that is maybe the Catholic faith is not in fact true, then this whole debate collapses, as it is a foundational assumption that we believe in God. It is a foundational assumption that we believe in the teachings of the Catholic Church, and if we do not, if we say that maybe these are not true, as I think it's the 3rd speaker of the affirmative team is implying in her point of information, therefore that contradicts a core tenet of this debate and therefore is not true. And yes, I'd also like to agree, we do need to teach the Catholic faith first. People should know, because this is the Word of God. This is the thing that we all that here hold as the thing that we need to believe is true. It is the bedrock of our existence. And again, back to 5-year-olds. Yes, 5-year-olds should, because 5-year-olds are young and impressionable, and they shouldn't be confused. We should teach them very clearly, here is the religion. And I'd like to say, we can still teach in high school different religions. We can still go ahead and say, here are the teachings of Hinduism, Islam, and Buddhism. But we do not need to teach them equally. We can say, here are these teachings, let's explain them, let's see what they are. But we do not need to say they are correct. We just need to acknowledge them, and we do not need to acknowledge them equally. Secondly, I'd like to point out that for many people, I'd also like to talk about the priesthood. The priesthood is a very important part of Catholicism, and we need it. It is an important part of how we perform Mass, it's an important part of how we perform lives. Priests are the people who deliver reconciliation, an important part of the Catholic faith, which allows us to forgive our sins. These are needed and required parts of the Catholic faith, and I have serious problems that this moot may weaken that institution. Firstly, Catholic teachings from a young age help reinforce the basic beliefs about Catholicism, which allow people to
Point of
understand.
information.
Yes.
Wouldn't you say that if a priest is that impressioned by a different religious teaching that they shouldn't be a priest?
Yes, if they do become. No, what I'm saying is that a priest, as Catholics, we need to provide clear direction to young people. And we should acknowledge the fact that people can believe in religions which we do not believe is true. Let's remember, there is literally one of the 10 Commandments and in fact what we were talking about before with Matthew, is we must love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. We have to believe this God. That is one of the core tenets of one of the Gospels. We have to. And so, but the problem is, in this, that people do not believe sometimes the true fact. People do not believe in Catholicism. I'd like to finish on one last point. The teachings of the Catholic schools are important because they give us the basis of understanding our faith. They allow people to understand the important parts from a young age. This allows them to develop into good priests and theologians, which teach us the beliefs of the Catholic Church and allow us as lay people to understand and to live the Word of God. Thank you.
speaker, and I'd like to welcome our third affirming speaker.
Hello, I'm the third speaker for the affirming team. I'd like to start by reaffirming what our first speaker said, outlined, which is that we're not reducing the value of Catholic education by affirming this moot. We're acknowledging and recognising the fact that teachings of all major religions equally is of more value today than the teaching of Catholic beliefs predominantly. I would also like to say that Catholic schools can still carry Catholic values without their beliefs predominantly being Catholic. Now, I'd just like to rebut something from the first negating speaker who quoted Matthew 20:22 when Jesus says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, and to love your neighbour as yourself, which are the greatest commandments. How can you love God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind if you've had no choice but to be exposed to Catholic teachings? The second speaker spoke about how...
PY?
Yes.
How can you expect to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength if you're exposed to every religion?
Can I
Equally.
just continue? And I think I can answer that. Ask again if you're still not sure. Your decision to follow Christ, when all you've known about is following Christ, isn't fully informed and is likely to sway when other religions, when you leave school, as our second speaker spoke about, actually come into your life in a stronger way. I'm a Christian, and I haven't been in a Catholic school all my life, and I have been exposed to lots of religions, and I didn't choose to become a Christian until I was older, until I knew about all of the other things. And personally, I believe that I'm not going to sway from that because I know God and I know his teachings, but I also know what everyone else's teachings are, and how that affects what I'm saying is that the other teachings are shown to be invalid through what I know of God. Yeah, your decision to follow Christ isn't fully informed, is therefore likely to sway. I would also like to say that a Catholic school is made to equip students, to equip them to share their faith and to equip them to show the character of Christ through who they are. If we don't understand other religions, we're not fully equipped to take our knowledge of Catholicism to new levels and stay strong in our faith. Again, I'd just like to go back to where I said that Catholic schools can still carry Catholic values without having to predominantly teach the Catholic beliefs. Catholic beliefs can still be taught, and we, as going to a Catholic school, will know that our school is a Catholic school, and we will know the values of Catholicism, which will strengthen our Catholic background, but we'll also equally know the values and, but more importantly, know the beliefs of other religions, which can help us to inform other people in the world about our Catholicism and our faith. If we're equipping people to share our faith, they need a solid understanding of other religions, because otherwise people are just not going to listen to them. If you were a completely different religion to me, and I came up to you and started talking about my religion with no understanding of what you believed, I wouldn't be able to put it forward to you in a way that you could understand.
POI?
Yeah.
Surely, though, this is what the problem that you're talking about here, which is are missionaries able to effectively preach the good word of the Lord? Surely that is a task of the missionary to understand the basics of the religion, not as our job, which is to be worshippers of the faith.
So I would answer that by saying, as Catholics, we are all called to be missionaries, and we're all called to share the word of Christ, and we're all called to show our faith to the world. So being a Catholic school, we're made to equip students, right? On our graduate profile at Campion College, it talks about becoming like Christ, And becoming like Christ means being prepared to share about his teachings and share about what he believes. I understand that you're probably thinking that how can we do this if we don't predominantly know about the Catholic faith? But again, the values are still enforced in the background without being pushed onto us from the front from, say, the age of 5. So I'll just finish up by saying that, again, this house believes Catholic schools should expose students to the teachings of all major religions equally, rather than a predominant focus on Catholicism, because we are called to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, which we can't do unless we have an understanding of other religions, because how can you love something if you don't know anything else? And also, Catholic schools are made to equip students, so we need to be understanding of other religions so that we can be equipped to go and share our faith with them in a way that they can understand fully. Thank you.
That makes sense. Okay. I'd like to thank the third affirming speaker for their case, and I'd like to welcome up the third negating speaker.
Much to, I'm sure, my first speaker's disappointment, I haven't identified 3 points of clash, but rather I still have identified 2 that are important. So, firstly, these points of clash are the goal of a Catholic school and how the opposing house's model will not work mechanically. So, I first like to start off with the goal of a Catholic school. We've heard from the other opposing house that first of all, the goal of a Catholic school has come under much analysis, this debate. The opposing house states that their model will help fill the goal mentioned in the Bible of spreading the good news and converting others. However, on this side of the house, we believe more that the goal of these schools is, yes, spreading the good news, but it does it in itself. We're not necessarily trying to encourage these kids to go out. It is their choice. And before I continue on, I'd also like to address something very important. We've heard a lot from the opposing house about how being exposed to many religions helped them reach this enlightenment and choosing Catholicism. Now, I myself have been exposed to many other religions as well, and so I have a question for the opposing house. Can you say with full surety that during this exposure to many religions, you were exposed to all of them equally, which is what the motion states? Because last time we checked, we both go to these Catholic schools, and for 4, maybe 5 years, you've been exposed to Catholicism. Can you say that you were exposed to, let's say, as we mentioned, the big 4? Can you say that you can be exposed to the other 3 for that time frame as well? Because it doesn't line up with your age difference. And yet, you still chose Catholicism. Now, we do acknowledge the opposing house's point surrounding the idea that we need to know other religions. And it is a very valid point. In fact, over our side of the house, we still agree with that and do that, because our side of the house says that we have a predominant focus on Catholicism, not a mandated or a fully focused with complete irrelevance to any other religion. And this is important, because we can still have this goal of having respect for other religions, which is the opposing house has been calling for, while still teaching the religion and spreading the good news, which, as I said earlier, is what the goal of what the Catholic school is. And on to another point of clash in the sense that the opposing houses model is mechanically, it's completely impossible, and it's the idea that, as my second speaker brought up, that with the lack of definition for what a school is, we can cause confusion at many different levels. And rather than giving them the choice to go down one or another path of religions, we may be removing the choices entirely. Because if we teach so many different religions at a young age, there is a high possibility that these religions would start to be treated more as stories than actual beliefs. And that is a very significant part of that, because we look at things like Bible at these schools, and we take it as these are historical events, not stories. It's a huge part about being a Catholic school, which is exactly why the opposing house's argument would cause these schools to not be Catholic, which is what my first speaker kept bringing up. And so, to sum up, and to bring into a POI and points that were mentioned earlier, I must ask this. When we look at Matthew 22:34-40, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, can we truly say that we love the God with all our heart, all our soul, all our mind, and all our strength if we are constantly questioning which religion is right? Thank you.
First of all, I would like.
Wait, we still got two more.
Yeah, leaders of life.
Don't worry. All good. Don't worry. It's just, yeah, two more speeches. Two more speeches.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Oh, one thing.
All good, don't worry. So we're just running. Okay. Okay. I'd like to thank the negating speaker for the case, and as per usual for the leader's replies, there's 3 minutes, and I'd like to welcome up the negating side for the leader's replies.
Alrighty. As the leader of the negating side of the house, I have managed to identify 3 main points of clash. The first being contradictions of core Catholic tenets. The second being the devaluation of Catholic teaching and beliefs. And thirdly, the understanding and questioning versus exposure to main religions. So taking this first one, the contradiction of Catholic tenets. On our side of the house, we have argued that if we were to equally expose students to teachings of all major religions, opposed to a predominant focus on Catholicism, it would simply no longer be a Catholic school. And this directly, as my third and second speaker have argued, it directly contradicts and contrasts the sole purpose of Catholicism, and mechanistically is no longer possible, as my first speaker argued. It contradicts the core tenet of the school, the simple goal of a Catholic school wanting to give teachings about Jesus Christ would no longer serve its full purpose under the opposing side model in favor of the motion. This brings me into my second point on the devaluation of Catholic teaching and beliefs. On the other side of the house, we have heard that if we contrast and juxtapose Catholicism with other main religions, it enforces and deepens meaning for Catholicism. But what the other side of the house fails to recognize that if we did so, there would still be a predominant focus and lean towards Catholicism. And in doing so, it also fails to acknowledge my first point of clash, talking about how it would directly contradict these core Catholic tenets that underpin our faith, underpin the goal of a Catholic school, and underpin Catholicism on the whole. Thirdly, and finally, wanting to talk about understanding and questioning versus exposure. On our side of the house, we talk about if we were to be exposed to these main religions, that would inherently come with questioning and, trying to understand. And mechanistically, we heard on our side of the house, which received very minimal rebuttal, that this is mechanistically impossible. If we, taking the example of us all having a somewhat relatively large Catholic education, how are we to replicate that for all main religions? It is mechanistically impossible. In an ideal world, an ideal scenario, it would nearly be impossible as well. Yes, so talking about why we're on this point. Firstly, with the contradiction of Catholic tenets, we failed to receive much rebuttal on the point that if we were to equally expose students, it would, and ignore a predominant focus on Catholicism, A, it wouldn't be a Catholic school, B, it would contradict the core tenets of Catholicism, and C, contradicts the motion. 2, talking about the devaluation of teaching and beliefs. If, as the other side of the house has argued, we need this contrast, we need this equal presentation of other religions to actually enforce meaning, is simply mechanistically impossible and has been fully rebuked by our side of the house. And finally, talking about how if we were to expose, there would be understanding and questioning of other religions, which would detract from the fact that Catholicism and its teachings. Yeah. Thank you.
To close this debate, I would like to welcome out the leaders of Phi. For the affirming side, please come up.
Right. Hi everybody, I was the first speaker for the affirming team, not the negating. And we on the affirming team strongly believe that Catholic schools should educate, muddling my words here. Okay. This house believes that Catholic schools should expose students to the teachings of all major religions equally, rather than predominantly focusing on Catholicism. This is because Catholicism is not the only religion in our current world, right? We cannot expect everybody to learn about Catholicism if we are not open to learning about their religions as well. As my second speaker said, human dignity is a huge part of the Catholic social teachings. To have human dignity, we must also accept other people for who they are and what they believe. Through teaching and talking about other religions in school, we can not only learn about these religions, but it can also cause us to strengthen our own religions, learning about the differences that we have between them. Jesus teaches us to love ourselves as we love our neighbor. To love our neighbor as we love ourselves, sorry. How can we love everyone like Jesus loves them if we don't know about them, if we don't know what they believe, if we don't know how they live? Catholic school values are what make a school Catholic, right? Campion College has values like in Christ, our motto, in Christ we are alive. We are alive in Christ, but that doesn't mean that we completely neglect the other religions that are out there. We believe that to be like Jesus is to accept everybody, and that accepting everyone does not then devaluate being a Catholic. We have said that we have been exposed to multiple religions. We have been exposed to different ways that multiple people go to Catholic schools, not only Catholics, right? But that doesn't mean that because we let the people of different religion into the school, that it downplays or devalues the Catholic religion, Catholic faith in itself. As the affirming team, we strongly believe that Catholic schools should expose all students to all the major religious teachings because to accept God fully, we must understand the other religions, and despite learning about these religions, to accept Him fully, we must know these religions and to accept Him with our mind, body, and soul. Thank you. This is why the boot shall stand.
like to thank everyone for a good debate, and I'd like to welcome the teams to go down the middle, shake hands, bump elbows, whatever, or we go outside and come to our conclusion.
Good job, guys.
Unless you're not. Okay. So yeah, it was a good debate. It was a very close but clear debate. But before, actually, I'll just get into it now. We believe that St. John's won this debate. Yeah.
Good job, St.
So congratulations and commiserations. So the main thing about this debate is it lacked characterization and it lacked a good case on both sides of the house. Yeah. What we see mainly from AF is the push of exposure. You get all this other elements, look, and getting all these different points of views creates a bit of person, creates a bit of Catholic, and all this stuff. And then what we see on the NIG side, their main push was it's a Catholic school, it's important to those faith, and this idea just isn't very feasible, and it would be hard to push in the real world. We don't hear too much rebuttal on either sides. There was we hear basic surface level, but we don't really go into the actual mechanisms of the argument. Yeah, there isn't too much really on rebuttal. But yeah, we hear a lot of about contradictions, but on both sides, it's not really explained fully to what it could have been. Yes, it's a contradiction, but what does this mean to the motion? What does this mean to our side of the house? Yeah, there was, on the impacts as well, I feel like they either A, weren't present enough, B, weren't important enough, or C, just not the correct impacts I would have chosen for this, making a case. But that just comes under the case building of this debate. And yeah, the points of clash, it was mainly around the feasibility and being a good Catholic. Yeah, so obviously we hear from the NIG side about it isn't feasible. We don't hear a lot of pushback at all on the AF case. AF side, and then the exposure and then important to faith. Those are the 2 points that was at that point of clash. And I was more willing to believe the negating side because they just didn't give me more examples, but they walked me through how their side would have worked. And I think that was the main reason why we gave that point to the NIG case. So just quick in conclusion, 2 main points of clash. 1, feasibility. 2, the exposure and the importance of faith. And then NIG won both of them. Overall debate lacked characterization and good case building. So, yes.
Good afternoon. Thank you, adjudicators and the audience, for coming here today. So, our moot is, which we support, the Bible is open to individual interpretation. So I think the most clear point to start with is that the Bible, by its own nature, how it was written and how it has been used throughout history, it is not black and white. It is not simply words on a page that one person can interpret and have a definitive understanding of. Religions, cultures, societies have been shaped by these words and its different understandings. If we are made to follow a single interpretation, one right interpretation, supposedly, how can our own individual religious freedom be upheld? How can we be free to have our own beliefs, develop our own understanding, develop our own ideas, to evolve as a society? How would that be possible with one single interpretation? How could we achieve the landmark shifts in society that we have achieved if we were not able to improve upon and change our understanding of the Bible as we learn more, as we discover more, as we come up with new ideas? To take the Bible at its face value with a single interpretation would not allow us to evolve. This really just isn't a question of the Bible being right or wrong. It is about your religious freedom. It's the reason why religions and cultures exist. What if there was just one text, one interpretation, one religion? Throughout history, individual interpretation
has shaped events, it's shaped people, for better or for worse. But the reality is that it is a key part of our society. And if we were to further accept and support our own individual interpretation, we'd be more accepting of each other's faiths. We'd potentially even prevent global conflicts with more solid understanding of each other. We'd be more emotional, we'd be more supportive. It'd lead to a better society. What if we didn't? We had a single understanding. We'd be fighting against each other. We'd be unsure. How could we do this? How do we know what is right if we're not free to know what is right? Those are my points. But we do have our second and third speakers still to come. We'll have Nina give some more real-world examples, the importance of having your own individual interpretation of the Bible. And our third speaker, Monique, will focus mainly on rebuttal. And that is why today, I believe that the Bible is certainly open to individual interpretation. It is personal. It is not black and white. There is no one way to understand the Bible. Each religion is based on its own understanding. It is personal. Individual spirituality, individual interpretation. And that is why we believe today that the moot shall stand.
To thank the first affirming speaker. I'd like to welcome our forgetting speaker to open their case.
So I'll just organise my notes. This side of the House does not believe that the Bible is open to personal interpretation. So first off, I'm just going to go over, I'm going to be covering the main substantive points of the Catholic Church is the one true interpretation and the dangers of personal interpretation then, and then I will be going with some rebuttal, and my second speaker will be going over those points, introducing the new point of faith, and then my third speaker will be going over some rebuttal and the points of clash. I'd like to start this debate off with the Bible verse. Galatians 5:16. If you are guided by the Spirit, you won't obey your selfish desires. And this is really the key principle of this debate. The fact that we must follow what God says, and what God's true church, the Catholic Church, under this debate says. And that if we do not do this, this personal interpretation will instead be decided by our own human and selfish desires, which I'm going to get to in this debate. To start off with some rebuttal quickly, the opposing side has said that how can religious freedom be upheld under one single interpretation? And our side would like to make it perfectly clear. We are not imposing religion on anybody or anything of the sort. We are instead saying that God wants one single church and one single interpretation under his Catholic Church. And the fact that we're not going to regulate or force people to do this, just that that is what God wants, etc. The opposing side has also said that their side of the House will lead to less conflict, but yet they have not shown how this will happen. And our side of the House will instead show how our side will lead to less conflict, and how their side will lead to more conflict, shown later in my substantive and my dangers of personal interpretation. So to start with the first point, the Catholic Church is the one true interpretation. The Catholic Church is God's holy church, which we're assuming under this debate. And if we assume that, then this is the only valid and true interpretation. God speaks to humanity through the Pope and through the Catholic Church. And if we do not believe this, and we believe that instead that we can all personally decide what we want the Bible to mean, instead of following the Church and following God, this means this is going to lead to problems. Not only is this theologically wrong, but it's going to lead to more dangerous. To go against and go for personal interpretation is to go against God himself and to go against God's Holy Catholic Church. God does not want the church to be divided. God wants us to listen to him through the Pope, through his church, through his bishops, and through the priests. If we do not do this, we're going to be misguided. We're not going to follow what God wants, and it's going to lead to more conflict. Let's take this further. What will happen if we decide that the Bible is open completely to personal interpretation, that we want people to make different decisions and believe the Bible however they want? The church is going to be split up. There's going to be multiple different sects, more split than the Christian church already is, and the Catholic Church will almost seem to non-exist, because the Catholic Church functions that there is one true interpretation, and that's the interpretation of that Catholic Church, which is why we must follow it. God doesn't want his believers to be divided. God wants his believers to be united under this Catholic Church, and this is why we must do this. So again, just quickly again, why does this matter? This matters because we want to follow God, and we follow God through listening to him and through following his Catholic Church. Now on to my second substantive point, the 3 aspects of danger from personal interpretation. This danger comes in 3 aspects: danger to the church, danger to society, and theological and spiritual danger for individuals. To start off with church, I've already touched on this, but let's take it further. The danger to the church is that the church will no longer exist. The church will split into multiple forms, multiple sects. There will be no united church. There won't be a united Catholic system around the world if we believe that this is just going to be personally interpreted. We'll have all different subgroups, and the church uses its globally united aspect. Part of what makes the Catholic Church so great, because we have united across the world. In New Zealand, in Brazil, in so many places, so many countries across the world, we have the church as a foundation under the Pope and under God's true interpretation. And there's also severe danger to society. When religion is interpreted, it leads to conflict. We can look at the example brought up earlier today in the junior speeches with the Irish Protestants and with the Irish Catholics and the UK Protestant and the English Protestants. How this conflict, how there's different interpretations of these religions, of Christianity, caused conflict within that. Do we want to exacerbate that? Do we want to split Catholicism more, to cause more of these micro conflicts and even major conflicts? A different religion, but we can look at countries like Syria or other Middle Eastern countries, for example, which different interpretations of Islam and even Christianity in some Middle Eastern countries has caused widespread conflict. And we want to have an interpretation that is correct not only, but that leads to less conflict. There's also severe theological and spiritual dangers. As we have said, the Catholic Church is the true and correct interpretation of God, of the Bible and God. And so the dangers to this is that if we have different sects and different groups of this means that some of them will not be what God wants. So this means that people may start to justify their sins under their interpretation of the Bible, or it may lead to other things. And what this means is that we will have less people following what God wants, and probably eventually less people going to heaven and listening to God because they're sinning more, because they're justifying it under their own personal interpretations. Because they are doing these things, and so that's incredibly dangerous, because we want people to be following God. We want people to not be sinning, and so if we have these personal interpretations, not only are we not following God in the church, as we have said, not only is that going to lead to more conflict within regions that based on personal interpretation, but this is also going to lead to severe personal and spiritual implications for people. People are going to sin more because they're justifying it under their own personal interpretations. And so just to sum up the points of this debate, our side of the House believes that the Bible is not open to personal interpretation. The Catholic Church is the true and one interpretation of God, and that there's several problems of personal interpretations, dangers to the church splitting up using that, dangers to society, and also theological and spiritual implications for individuals. Thank you.
Negating speaker, I'd like to welcome up the second coming speaker.
The affirming team have talked about the danger of personal interpretation. What about the dangers of no personal interpretation? It is no secret that the Catholic Church has abused, they have oppressed, especially women, as evident with the Magdalene laundries in Ireland. And they have admitted their wrongdoing and apologised. Accepting that religions are always correct is faulty, without criticisms to expand their faiths. A second point I'd like to address of the negating team, that there being multiple religions weakens the Catholic Church. Why does religious diversity threaten a religion if it is true? It doesn't, as can be seen with Catholic and Protestant divergence, as I will be talking about. Individual spirituality, individual interpretation. The Bible is open to individual interpretation. Individual interpretation
Hear why?
declined is why we even have Catholicism in the first place. As we all know, it began as a Jewish sect. Take Catholic and Protestant, both individual interpretations of the original word, of the original text of the Bible. Now, this isn't a question about which is more correct. It is merely an observation of individualism. In the Catholic faith, we have a big focus on Mary. Yet her story is different in Luke's compared to Matthew's Gospel. Luke being an individual interpretation of Matthew's Gospel. Catholicism, we love for all. We love thy neighbour, and we forgive, just as Jesus taught us. Forgiveness and acceptance are massive roles in the Catholic faith. Now, if we look at Protestant, some of the same values as well, but
Hear
their
why?
declined their individual interpretation. They focus on schola scriptura, individual in itself, although literal. They are less decorative than Catholicism, less ornate. For example, the houses of the rich in Amsterdam, all Protestant settlers, yet they believed that they had to be humble in their showings. They both involve a different and thus individual interpretation of the Bible. Now let's look at the modern world. In the modern world, individualism is nurtured and cultured. To be your own individual is a celebration. And why should faith mean anything to you unless you have developed an individual, personal connection to God? Your interpretation will differ from your neighbours, will differ from your friends, could even differ from your parents. But this is what brings you closer to God. For example, you highlight your Bible. There might be a quote in there that speaks to you. You have attached individual interpretation to that. An interpretation that will, again, inevitably differ from your neighbour. And as Jesus says, love thy neighbour. Individual interpretation is very important. Individual spirituality is individual interpretation. And this is why the MOOC shall stand.
I'd like to thank the second affirming speaker for their speech, and I'd like to welcome up the second negating speaker.
I'd like to start off my speech with some rebuttal. Firstly, from the affirming side of the House, we hear how they say that there's dangers of how they say there is dangers of personal interpretation, of no personal interpretation, like how we said. They said that there's also dangers of no personal interpretation, which is what we believe on our side of the House. However, and as you mentioned, there has been some bloodshed and wars, but there's also more wars and other atrocities committed by a personal interpretation, such as when people create cults or stuff like that because they believe certain parts and they change the words to suit themselves. As my first speaker talked about, how you can change the words of the Bible, of what you see in the Bible, to make yourself feel better, say you haven't sinned because you're changing what you actually think you see in the Bible. other points that the affirmative side of the House talked about is that how the Catholics and Protestants, have different interpretations of the faith, how they're different, they look at stuff. But because of those different personal interpretations, are we going to talk about all the bloodshed, all the wars, all the rivalries, all how the people have been treated less because of their one religion compared to the other? Like, that is a key point about how we're going to talk about Protestant and Catholics and how they are different, their personal interpretations. No, thank you. There's all these different things that happen. There's all these wars fought because they have personal interpretations of the Bible instead of taking personal, instead of having one interpretation as what we believe on our side of the house. Moving on to some other points is that how they haven't really yet, the affirmative side of the house hasn't really given rebuttal yet on my first speaker's point, and I'd like to first, because they kind of just avoided them and moved to the side instead of going at them directly. Now my first point is about what is the point of faith in the first place if you personally interpretate each part of what you worship, what parts you worship, what parts you don't worship. You choose, you don't worship everything, you just choose the parts that make you feel better, that you want to. Because the point of, the whole point is you have to worship everything. You can't pick and choose, otherwise, like my first speaker said, you have moments where you miss out certain parts so that you don't feel like you sin as much, where you don't feel as bad about yourself when you look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day. So, about my point of what is the point of a faith in the first place if you personally interpret all the parts of it, is who does this affect? This affects the people. This affects me, you, everyone else here. Because if we personally interpret what part of it we believe, this has effects like, well, if we say this part isn't a sin, so that means but then we're still doing it. Then in the afterlife, as my first speaker said, we might go to hell instead of heaven, as we ignore the key part of the Bible. Now, why is this so important? Because, as I said previously, the whole point of the faith is that you believe in the higher power. You believe in God, the higher power, the all-knowing. You believe in everything He says, as He is all knowledge, compared to you, a mere mortal. So why would you believe Him? Why would you believe yourself over or other people? Why would you follow someone else's personal interpretation over God Himself, the all-knowing, the all-power, the all-super being? Because otherwise, if you follow someone else's personal interpretation, a mere human, another dude, you lead to things like cults, like stuff like that, where you're all in these cults, and then the bad thing about these cults is that, there's, as you said before, maybe women get mistreated in these cults and all these stuff. Some people, no thank you, all these people are overlooked and stuff, compared to when you look at the all-being, the all-knowing, the all-going God, and when you follow His instructions and His faith. Now, backing up my first speaker's point about the dangers of personal interpretation. Firstly, the dangers of personal interpretation of the Bible on the church. This is because of this personal interpretation of the church. Leaders of the church, they diverge against each other to their own personal interpretations, and then we have almost all these sub-faiths of the Catholic Church instead of one true faith, where all the leaders are trying to unite to make everything better, get rid of problems, get rid of poverty. Where if everyone else, instead of focusing on the problems with the poor and stuff like that, instead they're going to focus on making sure everyone follows their personal interpretation of the true faith. Secondly, moving on to the point about how the dangers of personal interpretation on society. On society, this is because there's been so many, over the years, as my first speaker stated, religious wars on personal interpretation, as my first speaker named some. And these are so dangerous because, well, people's lives are being lost. Now, thirdly, or on this last point about it, is the dangers of personal interpretation on theology and spirituality. This is because people are being led astray. People are being led astray by the true faith because of all these personal interpretations. They're not getting to worship and follow the true faith, as instead they're worshipping these personal interpretations of what some dude said, instead of the all-knowing, all-being, super powerful God. And overall, combined, this is so bad because we're not following what God wanted us to do. We're following what some do, or a whole lot of different people see. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the second negating speaker. I'd like to welcome up the affirming speaker.
Afternoon, everybody. I'd like to start with addressing some faulty assumptions from the negating team. There was a lot of talk about what interpretation means. A lot of talk about some dudes' interpretations. What if I said to you that the homily at your church, the homily at the Mass we were just at, is just some dude's interpretation of the Bible? Does that make that homily, that expression of Catholic faith, any less important? Does it make it any less valid? I think not. And this is where I think our understanding of interpretation is very important. It was argued that interpretation means picking and choosing. No, that's simply not following a religion. There can be interpretation within a faith that leads to greater development of religious authorities, such as the Catholic Church, accepted.
Do you acknowledge that the interpretation in the homily you mentioned is interpretation of the Catholic Church, not of individuals?
I believe, the affirming team believes, that the interpretation of Scripture to our own and personal individual context, which is what a homily is in fact an individual interpretation. Because although it uses Catholic teachings to fuel this interpretation, at the end of the day, it is an individualized interpretation for the people the priest is speaking to. As I was saying, interpretation can be used for the development of religious authorities and personal faith journeys. There is an assumption that individual interpretations means that the main teachings of your faith must be wrong. Interpretation simply aids established faiths and deepens individual connections within religions. There's also been a large emphasis on this moot falling simply because there is one truth, a Catholic truth. Then this debate becomes a debate on religious correctness, ignoring the fundamental aspect of this moot, that we need individual interpretation to fully understand the Bible in relation to our own lives and problems.
Here why?
Accepted.
Does the opposing house acknowledge that the Catholic Church is God's holy church?
I will like to not talk about my religious standings in the middle of my debate. Thank you. Now, another faulty assumption, that the Bible is clear. As our first speaker talked about, it is not black and white. The negating team takes an assumption. There is only one way to take it as it is. It is Lord's word, no argument. You would have to say there is one correct way to show and express your faith, whereas spirituality is a deeply personal thing. For example, the document of human fraternity, which celebrates religious diversity, something that the negating team has said time and time again is a negative, was signed by Pope Francis and other leaders of well-established and popular faiths, such as Islam, talking about the importance of accepting diversity. Collaboration leads to peace.
there being simply more religions isn't what makes conflict. Our refusal to accept that perhaps there may be more than one interpretation of the same text is what leads to conflict. And the Catholic Church, if we're going to continue with the emphasis on the Catholic Church, has been moving in this direction for a while. For example, Vatican II in the mid-20th century calling for greater acceptance of other faiths. What is another faith if not another individual and different interpretation of the Bible? Individual spirituality, individual interpretations. We all have our own individual faith journeys. We all have our own individual faith experiences. At Aquinas, we have a discipleship class that encourages us to actively engage in the faith. We take our own experiences and our faith is strengthened from that by learning about the Bible and also applying it to a real world context. How can what we learn in the Bible be applied to our own lives? And this strengthens a cycle of faith. Additionally, I found engaging with other individual or different interpretations of the Bible in classes at school. For example, when you hit level 2 and level 3 in NCA, you learn about Islam, you learn about Judaism. That has simply increased my own faith because I'm learning about lots of different other individual interpretations, and somehow, despite what the negating team believes, the strength of the Catholic faith within me has not wavered. Individual spirituality, individual interpretation. This house believes the Bible is open to individual interpretation, and this is why the MOOC shall stand. I was like, I want to finish it, but
Affirming speaker for their speech, and I'd like to welcome up the third negating speaker to continue their case.
Go Aiden!
Go Aiden! Quiet as a chief seat. On this side of the house, we've given a number of really strong points that haven't been responded to. We've talked about how it is God's intention from the beginning to speak to us throughout time through the Pope, and that the Church is his single source of how God interprets the Bible. And that has been largely not responded to. We have made a number of great points about the dangers of these things. We've talked about the dangers of personal interpretation leading to wars, leading to people being away from God because they fall for false ideologies, and these have been largely unresponded to. So that's what I want to start with. We've made a lot of points and there hasn't been a lot of rebuttal. I haven't had to do a thing where you go, here's what we say, here's what they say, now a third section to that rebuttal. There's just been a lot of responding to what they've said. And so let's get into some of that, and I've separated into three kind of groups. The first key point though is, what is individual interpretation? What do we mean when we say that? Now, we don't mean, like we've heard there, when you go and highlight your Bible and you have a little personal anecdote about the book of Mark or about a specific verse. We're talking about key, and we've made it clear throughout the debate when we talked about wars and things, key moral, ethical, philosophical issues inside of the Bible. That's why when we talked about wars, we talked about moral and philosophical and ethical issues that create these wars. When we talked about
people being away from God, we talked about moral and philosophical and political issues. We did not say that we don't support in any circumstances someone highlighting a verse in the Bible. That's not what individual interpretation means. So that's a key point of this debate. Secondly, I want to get into, does the church support individual interpretation? And that's something we've heard a lot from this side, that the Pope has signed all these acts and that the church uses things like homilies or other messages which are personal interpretation. Now, this is not true. God set up the church to be a mechanism to, because the Bible transcends time and it is meant to speak to different societies and many different groups, whether it be Romans or us now. God has put it out there and he's allowing the church in the current time to confirm. And so the church has no, you know, the examples they've given of these situations where the church has been supporting personal interpretation, like the homily. You know, a homily is not the personal interpretation of the priest. It's not him going against the church's position on, as I said, what is personal interpretation key. The church, so moral, ethical, philosophical issues. The priest does not get up there and directly oppose the church on key political or philosophical or moral issues. He may give a personal anecdote, as I said, but like someone does highlighting their Bible, but he does not go up there and say and completely oppose the church's position on abortion or on any of the key issues in the current day. So to say that the church, when they have a homily, is engaging in personal interpretation is false. To say that the church is engaging in personal interpretation when they simply say we allow the religions to exist and to do their own measures, that is not that's him respecting religious diversity and the fact that you can choose your religions, but at the same time, if you choose to be a Catholic, you're not going to go against key teachings of the Catholic Church. Once you get into Catholicism, you must respect the church. If we are having so many different interpretations and it's unclear what the church stands for, then why even have the church and why even sign these religious diversity documents? So the last point I want to get into, a key point of the debate that has not been responded to very much, is the dangers to society, the spiritual well-being of the public and the church itself. We've provided really strong points about how when you have all sorts of personal interpretations, this is what has led to so many wars in places like the Middle East. People having personal interpretations over religion. Look at Syria, they had the Assad government, they had rebel groups, they had the Islamic State, they had the Kurds, they had different personal interpretations of religion inside of the rebel groups. And so God does not want us to be personally interpreting key moral, philosophical and ethical issues. He wants us to trust the church's teachings so we do not go into these constant states of war and disrepute. Now we've heard that the church is something that cannot be trusted, and they cannot be trusted to provide God's message to us in the modern day, thereby kind of refuting the whole point of this debate, which is from a Catholic lens, the whole point of this competition. But to quickly respond to that, even though in certain circumstances we may hear that the church has its shortfalls in areas outside of key moral, philosophical, ethical decision making, there's no evidence that we've heard from their areas of shortfall, like abuse or whatever, that this is going to lead into their decision making. And even if it did, and the church, we're not saying the church is always right, but it's far better than the alternative, which is wars and people being led astray, as we've proven, because they take their own personal interpretations. We've also heard that this is against religious freedom, but again, as I've said, you are free to leave or join the church. This is not a cult, but we must actually have a church to join. We must not be so divided that there is no church, as we've explained in this debate. Is that 6 yet?
negating speaker that's speaking, and again, for leaders of pride, we shop around, so I'd like to welcome up the leaders of pride from the negating side first. Remember 3-minute speeches.
Come on, Nato.
Later. As the leader of the negating side in this house of this debate, I've identified 3 main points of clash in this debate, 2 which I weight highly and 1 which I weight very low. The 3 points of clash are God's purpose/intent, what causes more harm, and then a very minor one of what is personal interpretation, which I'm quickly going to touch on first. So what is personal interpretation? The opposing side of the team has said that personal interpretation is like the homily at the mass, etc. But outside of the house has clearly said that that is not personal interpretation. That is that bishop, that priest speaking for the Catholic Church, and that personal interpretation does not come to like extremely minor things of what resonates you in the Bible, but instead the Church's actual teachings and that. Although that is a very minor thing in this debate. Now onto the actual points of clash. God's purpose/intent. Outside of the house has said that God's intent and God's want is to have a unified church, and have that unified church under the Pope and under his Holy Catholic Church, which he has chosen. The other side of the house has presented a case where they said that, maybe God wants us to like look at different religions and just like have lots of different interpretations. But having a look at both arguments, it's clear that it's clear that we want to follow what God actually wants, and that we want to make sure that the church is unified again as God wants, and have this unified church and through God's purpose. So that's clearly why God's purpose in this is that the church is unified, and that the church is not an individual interpretation of the Bible, and that instead the Bible's interpretation is from the Catholic Church and from that church. Now, what causes more harm? This is in 3 aspects, as we've said throughout this debate. To the church, to society, and to the individual. What causes more harm to the church? What causes more harm to the church is our side believes that more personal interpretation will split the church. It will mean that God's Holy Church, the Catholic Church, is not actually in its thing in full function. So this means that the church will be broken up. We won't have that unified Catholic Church across the world, which I've said, which is a very bad thing. The other side has said that not really mentioned harm to the church caused by this. And instead said that maybe it's good if there's different churches like the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church, which hasn't actually really addressed this to the full extent, which is why we've clearly won this part of it. Next, harm to society. This is harm to society through wars and conflicts and things which we have said. Our side of the house has said that it's going to cause more conflicts because you've got these different interpretations of religions. We can look at the Irish Catholic and English Protestant example. We can look at things in Syria and other parts of the Middle East. And we just look at this in general. Different interpretations cause more conflict and more wars and fights over these interpretations. Whereas the other side has said it's going to cause more harm because you don't recognize or believe others' perspectives, but they haven't actually impacted this and shown why this will happen and why this is actually a factor. So we refuse to believe this because the other side hasn't shown us this. And now finally, what causes more harm to the individual and spiritual? This is clear. We've said that it's going to cause more harm because people will be led astray of different interpretations and sin, and the other side again has not fully addressed this. Quickly, I'd just like to end this debate in the way I started it. Galatians 5:16. If you are guided by the Spirit, you won't obey your selfish desires. We want to follow God. We want to follow the Church. We want to not be open to these personal interpretations, led astray by sin, etc. Thank you.
The leaders applied for the negating side, and to close off the debate, I'd like to welcome up the affirming side of the leaders applied.
Good afternoon. Again, our team strongly believes that the Bible is open to individual interpretation, and we believe that the negating team's argument is fundamentally flawed. The Bible is not black and white. It was written for individual interpretation, and this has been used throughout history. Individual understanding forms the basis of the world's religions and has supported the evolution of not only our religions, but society itself. This has shaped history for better or for worse, but one interpretation would be incredibly damaging to our future and suppress individual freedom. How can religious freedom be upheld if we are forced to follow a single correct interpretation? In this team's case, it appears to be the Catholic one. Landmark shifts in our world would not be possible without our ever-changing understanding of the Bible and its text. One interpretation, one understanding, no changes. How could that push us forward as a society? Our second speaker here, Nina, focused on rebuttal, but also the importance of having no personal interpretation is incredibly dangerous. In fact, the Catholic Church's insistence that they have the one and true singular interpretation, both on the wider world and on its followers, has allowed them to continue to abuse people. Catholicism stems from an individual interpretation, and it is in fact encouraged in the religion. Catholicism and Protestantism is the same text but different interpretations. Individual interpretations are rooted in Catholic faith, and yet NEG continues to insist that Catholic interpretations are the one. In fact, in the Bible itself, individual interpretations, the Gospel of Luke is in itself an interpretation of Matthew. The Bible itself encourages individual interpretations. What is the point of religion if you cannot personally interpret, personally connect, and develop a personal understanding of your connection if your understanding is forced to be based on one single person's interpretation? And our third speaker, Monique, focused on rebuttal and continued to assert the faulty assumptions from NEG. It's the same Catholic interpretation. The homily of our priest this morning was in itself, the bishop's homily was his own personal interpretation, which is encouraged by the Church. The Catholic Church encourages personal interpretation, so we cannot see how the negating team continues to insist that the Catholic Church does not support personal interpretation. Individual interpretation empowers people's personal faith journeys. This morning's homily, which is based on the bishop's personal interpretation, is aimed to shape followers' individual interpretations. It is built and rooted in our faith. In fact, the Catholic Church's own leader, the Pope, continues to encourage diversity and inclusivity and understanding and connection with others regardless of their background or faith. So how can we insist that one single individual interpretation is correct? Because it is not. And that is why we believe that the mooch shall stand.
So yeah, we've come to a conclusion, and it was a very good, very close debate, but it has to have a winner. So we've given the win to the negating team for St. John's. Congratulations and commiserations. So let's break down why we came to this conclusion. So in this debate, we found three main points of clash. One around the clarity and the characterization of an interpretation, which we weighed less heavily than the other two, which were mainly what will happen with individual and personal interpretation and what will happen without individual and personal interpretation. So the main push with, let's just get the interpretation out of the way. It was pretty unclear from the start. There wasn't really mainly a definition. There was a bit of questioning throughout, especially in second neg and a bit of third af, and then third negating came cleared up, and that was the definition that was we ran with, because it was laid out in a very nice and easy to follow way as to why we believe that. So that's just on the interpretation, and then getting into the two main points of clash which we weighed more heavily, which is what will happen with individual interpretation, which was the most covered point in this debate. What we hear from affirming what will happen with personal individual interpretation is we'll have more freedom into what we believe, people will become more supportive, people will be kinder, and there will be potentially less wars. And then what we hear with negating is we hear all these dangers about the church, about society, and personal and theological impacts and the negative impacts that it has. And it was laid out very nicely, especially in the first speaker, just kind of built out, here's these things, and it kind of went untouched for the rest of the debate. The only time it was touched upon was in the negating team's argument where they're just saying this wasn't responded to. So that is why we ended up giving that to the negating team. And then the other point of clash is what will happen without personal interpretation when we don't interpret it personally. What we hear on the affirming side So without personal interpretation, just following along, we hear it can lead to wars because you're trying to figure out first of all, figure out what is the true interpretation, and all this and stuff of what is personal interpretation, like what does that lead to, what are the wars, like how does it lead to people saying other people are wrong, that especially around the religion and like the problems around having a true religion and admitting things are wrong and all that sort of stuff. But what we hear on the negating team of what will happen without is mainly around faith and the impacts it has, especially around, what is faith if you don't accept everything, you can't pick and choose. This was a really close and not as important point of clash, but we did end up also giving that to negating, and so overall gave it to negating. Yep. I think that's about it.
I would again like to thank both our debating team, and I would also like to thank our adjudicators for giving up their time to judge our debates. Thank you.
Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. These are the rules that we as Catholics and as citizens live by. Hello, I'm Harrison, and I'm the first speaker of the affirming team. The motion today is that this House believes religion is necessarily linked to the principles of right and wrong behavior. We'd like to specify a few things. Where it says necessarily, we believe that means certainly, fundamentally. It is fundamentally linked to the idea of the principles of right and wrong behavior. Now, my main points will be about the historical context and how the historical context of religion and the law books and the previous sacred texts prove our point. While my second speaker here, Ahita, will talk more about the modern context and about extremism. Now, I'd first like to start with the historical context about Catholicism, as I am most advanced on Catholicism. We have so many things in the Bible that tell us what to do and what not to do, the ideas of right and wrong behavior. Let's talk about the basic, the most obvious one, 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments given to Moses by God on Mount Sinai. While there are more than 10 Commandments, the main 10 Commandments tell us things such as thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not rob. These seem like basic ideas, but evidently during ancient times they were not, and needed the idea of religion to fully be respected by everyone. It has later been used in a modern context in our laws. We also have the idea of Judgment Day that Jesus said would come sometime in the future, where we all would be judged on our behaviors and what we did that was right and wrong. So what he says in Matthew chapter 12, verse 36 to 37, he says, I tell you, on the day of judgment, you will have to give an account for every careless word you utter. And for by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Basically, what he's saying here is that what we do, what our behavior, whatever is right or what is wrong, will be judged by our religion, by our God on the day of judgment. He even explained this further in his teachings. He spoke many parables on right and wrong behavior. He spoke so many parables on being a good Samaritan or accepting someone even if they have wronged you. But even not just from Jesus, we have St. Paul's letters. St. Paul told the Corinthians, the Romans, the Galatians, what God intended them to do, what God wanted right and wrong behavior, and he explained these out so they could follow them, because that was the key basis of our religion, of what right and wrong behavior made up our religion, and what God intended for us to act like as Catholics. It is even mentioned in the Old Testament. Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 11 to 26, talks about the 12 curses of false idols, dishonoring parents, deceitfulness, murder, bribery. And it says, "Cursed be anyone who does not uphold the words of this law by observing them." They're basically pointing out the rules and the laws of right and wrong behavior and what we should do and what we shouldn't do as Catholics. But this isn't just only in the context of our religion. In Judaism, in Islam, in Hinduism, it is mentioned in their holy books, in the Torah for Judaism, in the Quran for Islam, for the Bhagavad Gita in Hinduism. In Islam, in the ancient days, and sometimes even modern contexts, the extreme punishments have been able to punish anti-Islamic, religious behavior. They've cut off hands, they've cut off feet. And while we are not condoning these ideas, what they prove is, under the basis of religion, we have decided what is right and what is wrong, is what is punished and what should be celebrated. But not just then, these religious rules have been twisted. They have been turned by such extremist groups. Let's say, for example, Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda, the perpetrators of the September 11th attacks, took the idea of jihad, the idea of religious warfare, the idea of what they in their religion should do as right, as what they considered right, that they decided that killing innocent people should be the right thing. Again, we are not condoning this. We are simply saying this means that they took the religious laws, the laws that were taught by them, and used them as their justification for right or wrong behavior. The comparisons can be also linked in right and wrong behavior really quickly in sainthood and knighthood. Sainthood and knighthood are essentially very similar things. You have a person who is given a status by a very important person because of the acts that they did in their lifetime. If they did a miracle in sainthood, or if they did a heroic act as knighthood, or gave to people, or like a medal in war. So basically, there's so many comparisons that we can make to our modern society that has been based on the laws of religion, which basically means that we, in our religion, are fundamentally based on the ideals of right and wrong behavior, which has led to the creation of the laws that we have today. So our nation is built on the laws of religion, and that's why the moot shall stand.
Okay, so first I would just like to start off with some rebuttal from the first affirming speaker. So at the start of his speech, the first affirming speaker used a lot of Bible verses to, talk about what's morally right or wrong. But like the moot is talking about religion, we're not necessarily just talking about the Bible when we talk about what's right or wrong, which is a reason why we actually disagree with the moot. But I'll go into that when I get into my points. So you brought up our laws, which are not identical to religious morality, because today a lot of people actually view religion to be something that's like, in Western society, they might view it to be outdated. So it's actually not something that applies to like our general morality that we have as a society. Like in law, religion is not always applicable to our laws today. So now I would like to go into my points. So, in the Bible, we see that Jesus was persecuted for spreading Christianity. He was persecuted by the Romans for spreading Christianity because they had two different beliefs. So we can't really use religion as a moral standpoint because there's a lot of different religions that have different standpoints, and they would just conflict a lot, which is what I'll be talking about in my points. So I will be talking about the first point, which is that religions contradict each other. I will then be talking about the second point, which is about morality, how it's nuanced, and how a lot of different factors go into morality. And my second speaker will be talking about the third point, which is that without religion determining morality, we will have an improved society. So for my first point, just a little more, there's not only Catholicism when we're talking about religion. We're talking about Catholicism, of course, but also Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, different sectors of Christianity. We're talking about even atheists. So, in New Zealand, we have a lot of these different religions living under one society. And what we use as a moral standpoint is not actually religion, but the law instead. What we think to be morally right or wrong today is a lot of the times, in society, is reflected by the law rather than people's personal religions. This is actually a good thing to have, rather than to have different certain religion determining what's right or wrong. We instead have the law to determine what's right or wrong. This is good because it's mostly agreed upon in society, and it avoids division that would come if we decided that religions have a say in what's morally right or wrong in our society. So how would religions having a say in what's morally right or wrong today, how would this be negative? Well, it would be negative because there's so many different religions in our society. How would we decide which religion gets a say in what is generally right or wrong? This would cause division, as people would fight about which belief of which religion is the best. It would cause division because people would just disagree with the general principles of different religions. This would cause tension in society, making our society less united and more divided because people are so split on what they think is, if they apply their beliefs into our general society, they will be split on what is right or wrong, rather than using the law as something that we can make a general consensus to. So this is obviously bad because our society needs to work together in order to create a better society that is better for everyone, where everyone can thrive and just improve in general. So people of different religions disagree on many things, maybe how to treat children, they could disagree on the environment, they could disagree on many aspects of the world. So this would of course cause discourse if we decide that religion determines what is generally right or wrong, and again would lead to tension and arguments between different religions, which is negative because as a society we need to be working together, feeding off of one another rather than fighting. So now I would like to go into my second point, which is about how morality is nuanced and everywhere. So religion can shape people's opinions of what is right or wrong. It can shape their morality.
Point of information.
No, thank you. But it can also it does not exclusively dictate what is right or wrong. Because people, not just religion, people learn through the world around them, especially even atheists, like, they don't have a religious background to determine what is right or wrong. So instead, they learn from what's around them, which is also true with people who are religious. They also learn a lot from society and from different people, rather than just from their holy book. So there's different things that dictate what someone could believe are right or wrong other than religion, such as like law, family, social circles, upbringing. These are all things that can make them decide what is right or wrong, rather than only their religion. To say religion decides on what is right or wrong is incorrect, as the average person would rely on more than religion to shape what they view as right or wrong. Even if you think that might not be the case, it is. Like, a lot of people actually take from their society and take from their family and take from their friends when they're deciding what is right or wrong personally for themselves. And this is why we believe the moot shall stand. So, cool. Thank you.
Negating team, and I'd like to welcome up the second speaker of the affirming team.
Hello everyone. First of all, I would like to start off with some rebuttal based on what the first negating speaker has said. So they spoke about a lot of ideas and how people's ideas of right and wrong comes from religion. However, we as AF believe it's the other way around, that religion is based on what is right and what's wrong. And she also talked about how religions contradict each other because they have different principles of right and wrong. And that is true, but that doesn't necessarily believe that religion is not linked to the principles of right and wrong behavior. We believe that it is still linked to the principles of right and wrong behavior. It just means that people have different views on what's right and wrong because of their different religions. So first of all, and she also mentioned some stuff about the law. However, I will be talking in my speech about how the law itself came from religion and that how we still essentially follow the religion with the law. So, now modern context, as we move into a more secular world nowadays, people tend to forget that where laws came from. We all know that the law tells us what is right or wrong, and no one is above the law. But if we look at where these laws are formed, like you have the text from years ago, for example, as my first speaker mentioned, the Ten Commandments, and then in Deuteronomy 27:11 to 26, you've got the 12 curses, and those are examples of ancient laws. And if we look at the context now, those laws have shifted to what's acceptable in the modern times. So the laws are formed from religion and like religious bases. Like for example, like, you know, sometimes in Islam it's acceptable to do animal sacrifices because that's their religion there, but but here, what Christianity doesn't really have animal sacrifices, so we believe that's wrong. They believe it's right, and this is an example of what shows that like the principles of right and wrong behavior and how that is linked to religion. And also like Jacinda Ardern, the previous Prime Minister of New Zealand, she is the perfect example of the Christian teaching, love thy neighbor. We've all heard of it. You know, after the mosque shooting, she showed some, you know, again, Catholic social teachings of common good and stewardship, because she united everyone under the common good and Christian values, and was not discriminatory to anyone because of their religions. And then this again like shows that the religious values are linked to the principles of right and wrong. And then I also want to mention like Islamic extremists. Again, we do not condone anything that they may do, but we still have to acknowledge that they are using the Islamic religion to as an excuse to say of what they're doing is good. They are twisting and using that religion, linking it to what their principles are of the right and wrong, and using it, like as Harrison mentioned with the Al-Qaeda and 9/11, and how they twisted that religion. Although it may not be good, it's still showing how it's linked to the principles in a way. And I also want to talk about the American society. Like again, I know in the modern day with like Gen Z, we are moving towards secularism. However, the first immigrants that came to America, the United States, were Puritans. So they came, that whole society, the whole American society is based off of religion. Like you've got things like the Pledge of Allegiance, the Constitution, the national anthem, they all mention God in some way. And the fundamental beliefs of American society, like all mention God, and again, showing how religion is like linked to the principles of right and wrong behavior in America. Like most people in the supreme government are Christian. Like even the New Zealand anthem mentions God, and it's again showing how our societies and how our laws have formed from the principles of right and wrong behavior. Like although nowadays we may be moving towards secularism, I do acknowledge that our society is still based upon like these religious values. Like you see it everywhere. Like people in India, like where I'm from, like people will use their holy books like the Bhagavad Gita, and that's transformed into the law there. And again, everywhere religion has existed for ages, and now it's adapting to fit with the modern times. And we see that like there's even a law called the Good Samaritan law. Like I wonder where that came from. Like, and again, this just shows how how religion is necessarily linked to the principles of right and wrong behavior, because it's been around for so long that it's just become a part of our daily lives, and we don't even realize it. So this is why we as Affirming believe that the moot will stand, and that religion is necessarily linked to the principles of right and wrong behavior. Thank you.
like to thank the second affirming speaker, and I'd like to welcome up the second negating speaker.
Firstly, I will begin with some rebuttal, and then I will strengthen my first speaker's point on how religions contradict each other, and then I will explore our last point, which is without religion determining morality, we have an improved society. So I'll continue with rebuttal. The first speaker stated a lot of scripture to determine what is good and what is bad. I see the flaw in this because it is based on an interpretation. Religions are how we view it as it is. How can we say something is good and bad when we take the word, read it, and say how it is good and bad, what it is saying is good and bad? I mean, we know religion was initially an oral tradition. Jesus said the word, someone took his word and wrote it down. They interpreted what he said and said, Jesus said this was good, and Jesus said this was bad. Of course, I'm talking through a Catholic lens. This debate is generally on religion. Interpretation plays a massive role in what we consider is good and bad, and this is why we cannot just say religion is necessarily linked to the principles of right and wrong when we interpret it to be right and wrong. The second speaker of the negating team has actually stated that laws shift in modern times. Yes, okay, we can agree that ancient laws were based on religion at that time, but laws adapt, they shift, they change almost yearly because of our society. If our society was stagnant, if we were all just based, if our society was stagnant and we were never changing, our laws would never need to change. No, thank you. But our laws change when it no longer reflects society that we live in. Our society, because we no longer believe that religion is fundamentally linked to right and wrong. Our laws change and adapt because of the people who uphold these laws. The first speaker also mentioned the 9/11 extremist, and I would like to say that the 9/11 extremist believed their religion was fundamentally right and wrong and behaved in this way. They understood the holy word to believe what is right and wrong. This is why religion should not be fundamentally linked to good and bad. Yes, they can say they don't agree with it, but this person still took their holy word and used it on how they behave. They saw their holy word and said, this is what is right, no thank you. This is what is right and this is what is wrong. Okay, now I will strengthen my first speaker's point on how religions contradict each other. It is no secret that New Zealand New Zealand government is a democratic society. If religion was fundamentally linked to what is right and wrong, we would be living in a theocratic government. Our laws would be based on religion, but it's not, because this isn't the truth. Our people around us don't take religion to be what is good and bad. Yes, some people might, but that isn't everyone, and we should be accepting this. For example, Hindus believe that they shouldn't eat cows because it's sacred to their religion. But on the other hand, Christians have no affinity towards, nothing wrong against eating cows. But while this is a harmless example, it does show how religions believe in different good and bad behavior. For if a Hindu saw another Hindu eating a cow, they would say that's bad behavior. But if a Christian saw that, they would say whatever, it's fine. Because religions are subjective, and contradict each other, which is what my first speaker stated. Moving on to my last point. Without religion determining morality, we would have an improved society. When people's morals are not based on religion, we create a more improved society. This is because people are less likely to judge or condemn based on religious writings. We've seen it time and time again. Leaders, dictators,
what have you, people with authority using religion and what they believe is good and bad as ammunition for their behavior and to condemn other people. If they see someone who they believe is not living up to what they know their religion thinks rights is good, then that person is condemned and judged through that lens. When religion dictates what's good and bad, it causes division in society because people think they have the authority to condemn others around the behavior of others around them, even when that person in question isn't practicing the same religion as them. When we, when religion does not determine morality, we have an improved society because people view others more positively. We don't need religion to, what's the word? Never mind, moving on. Just leave that alone. It creates a harmonious society that does not rely on religion to condemn who behaves good and bad. We would meet someone, we would get to know them, and we would know that this person is good because we know that they're good, not because our religion is saying that they're a good person. Or conversely, we would meet someone and see the way they behave and know the way they're behaving is wrong because we see it, not because our religion tells us to. People often underestimate how humans are intelligent beings. And, okay, thank you, and this is why I believe the motion South 4.
I'd like to thank the second speaker. Oh, wait, sorry. Well, I'd like to thank the second speaker of the negating team. I'd like to welcome out the third speaker of the affirming team.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Tyler, third speaker F. Now, I'm going to split my argument into 3 main points. I'm going to start with some rebuttal, moving into my points of clash, and then finishing on a summary of my team's main points. Straight into rebuttal. Now, the first speaker came out and criticized my first speaker for using Bible quotes. Now, in the practical sense, what are we doing here? We're at a Catholic school debate with Catholic Bibles in front of us. This is not a credible point to raise. Now, moving on to a second point. She claimed that religions contradict each other. Yeah, potentially that's true. That is what we've looked at. Sorry, I'll just grab some water. We agree with this. They do. But however, they are all reinforced and linked through this one claim that the principles of right and wrong behaviour are shared between them. Now, moving on to what the second speaker said. Now, the second speaker based her argument on looking, is religion good or bad? This is not the point of the debate. The point of the debate is looking into whether they are linked to the principles of right or wrong. She also talked about this scenario that we put forward about the 9/11 attackers, and she said, and I quote, 9/11 attackers based their actions on what they thought was right or wrong. And that is our point, that yes, they believed in Islam or an extremist version of it, and what they did was based on the principles of right and wrong from their religion. Now, I'm going to move into my points of clash now. All right, so for negative to win this debate, they would have to prove to us that religion isn't necessarily linked to the principles of right and wrong. They haven't done that, and I'll tell you why. Now, first of all, well, my main point of clash, which we weight really, really highly, is the core influence of the principles of right and wrong. What are the core influences of them? Now, negative says their family, law, and the country that is around you. We really disagree, and we've told you why. Now, listen to this. So, we look at law, and I need to talk at length about this. Around the world, look at Sharia law in Islam countries. The law in America, the Constitution, is heavily based on their religion and their interpretations of the principles of what's right and wrong. Now, law is a fundamental value or concept that is really from right and wrong, and we see it through all the ages, through all of history, is linked from religion. Now, moving on to family. Now, family is obviously, like, most families are religious, so that's kind of redundant. But country. Now, looking at New Zealand specifically, New Zealand was founded by Christians. Pompelier, there's another one in Wellington. Now, we look at this, and our national anthem starts with God. Our country, New Zealand, is founded by Christians. The core of our country is Christians. Now, what we believe the core influences are is religion, of right and wrongs, pardon me. And it's applicable in all these cultures. I mean, we've listed so many cultures and countries where the core influences of the principles of right and wrong are from these countries. Now, I'm going to move into my second point of clash, which we do rate as slightly lower. That is, religion contradicts each other. Now, that was a claim brought by the negative team, and we haven't really seen a whole lot of evidence brought up by them about this. However, we've rebutted this with our claims of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and Hinduism. They are all different, yes, they are, but they all share the same link, that they link to the principles of right and wrong behaviour. These are my points of clash, which we've both won. Now I'm going to move on to a summary of my team's main points. Now, Harrison came out listing the historical context of our topic. He talked about these biblical examples. He brought up specific Bible quotes, Catholic principles, such as like the Good Samaritan and St. Paul's letters. He also talked about this relationship between society with sainthood and knighthood, and how you do good things in society and you get rewarded for it. You get knighted. Now, Harrison's second example really came into Catholicism and other religions and how they work together to reinforce the concept of our motion. Now, we looked at the Torah, the Quran, Sharia law, all these concepts, which at the base of them talk about the principles of right and wrong behaviour. Now, Aisha talked about the modern context. She talked about how laws were formed at the very basis from religions, looking at society, looking at America, how when the first Puritans came there, how their laws were formed. She also talked more about the modern context in relation to Jacinda Ardern, how she united a whole nation over this concept of right and wrong behaviour, and that someone had done the wrong thing and the right thing was to come together. And she was a Christian, uniting a Christian nation and a Muslim community. That's all I have time for. Thank you.
Speaker, and I'd like to welcome up the third negating speaker.
Okay, I have identified 3 points of clash. The first one is like laws and, you know, the effects of religious right and wrongs around that. The second one is the societal impact, the societal effects, and then the last one is the source of morality. Firstly, with the concept of laws, my first speaker has said that you can, you know, use laws to help you decide what is good or what is right and wrong, and how it is a tool in morality and it can be used as a tool. which I think it was your second speaker said that actually, since laws come from religion, that must mean that religion has right and wrongs, which I think is flawed because while laws sometimes come from religion or line up with certain religions, might not be all of them, that doesn't necessarily mean it is from religions. Religion can have some right and wrongs, but it's not fundamentally, as your first speaker described the motion, fundamentally linked to religion. While religion obviously says don't kill, don't hurt each other, that is what most people would consider right. But it also says lots of things that may not also be used to be taken so seriously, and also might contradict other statements within its own like sacred text. Another thing to do with laws is that you said like how countries are based on religion, which like builds the laws, and how like just basically the religion, the right and wrongs of laws come from religion, which isn't always true, and also different countries have different religions, showing that their laws are different, which reaffirms the point of the contradictions within religions. Because of these differences in laws, they have differences in religions, which is shown through differences in laws in different areas. You can see that there's a difference in ideals between religions, which backs up the point that these contradictions don't go hand in hand, and how they can encourage discourse and just disagreements between religions because they both think that their religion is fundamentally right. Which leads on to my second point of clash of the societal effects. Well, my second speaker said that, if we do not think that religion is fundamentally linked to right and wrong, we can see the world in a better light. We're not expecting other people of other religions to have different right and wrongs to you. You can just be like, oh, well, they can have morality no matter who they are because, their religion doesn't isn't always exactly linked to morality, and therefore they could be a good person or a bad person or no right and wrong no matter what. It's not targeted from their religion. And another thing with the societal effects, which I don't really hear much on the affirming team of the societal effect on this, of how if we think religion shows right and wrongs, what that would do, whereas we kind of talked about how if we did think that religion showed right and wrongs, that it would just cause a lot of disagreements because people would be pushing their ideals more because they will think that their religion is right and is wrong, and when it disagrees with other religions, they'll just be totally against it. Which kind of links to, my third point of clash, which is source of morality. Well, my first speaker said that morality can come from lots of places. Yes, it can come from religious texts, but it can also come from your friends, your family, how you grew up, where you grew up, just life experiences. I think we're learning, and I think it's good to understand that, not everything's black and white, and source of morality can come from multiple places. If it's exclusively from a religious text, what happens if there is sometimes, something that's wrong in that religious text? Or what happens when people disagree? It just causes so much discourse and, sometimes segregation between other people who have different beliefs as you. And it's not a positive for our society, which is, again, the point of clash, and how this is negative for, just cohesion and just living together because of these differences. Some other things you brought up were how, basically just the Bible a lot, of how it tells us right and wrong, which that could be true still, but it's hard to say it exclusively tells us right and wrong, especially because there's multiple religions. If this is true that the Bible tells us exclusively right and wrongs, what happens if a different religion has different views of right and wrong? Then it's just contradictory. Another thing is that you said since overall religious scriptures agree, that means that it's true that they have right and wrong, which is a bit flawed because while they agree on big things, people without religious scriptures can also agree on those big things, but that doesn't make everything in the scripture or text proving everything is right and wrong. Yeah, thank you.
As per usual, for leaders' replies, I'd like to reverse the order, so I'd like to welcome up the leaders' reply for the negating team.
So throughout this debate, I have identified 3 main points of clash between the affirming and negating team. The first point of clash I've identified is if people's morals are based on religion. My second point of clash I'd identified is law and how religion plays a role into law. And my third point of clash I have identified is if not having religion determine what's good or bad improves society. So going on to the first point about how people's morals are influenced by religion, we on the affirming team, on the negating team, we have acknowledged that religion can have a role on what people view as right or wrong, of course, because it's a part of them, it's a part of who they are. But so are a lot of other things which we have talked about, such as, family, friends, environment, where they're from. All of these things can influence their views on what they believe to be right or wrong. So that is why I believe we have won that point, because we have acknowledged that, yes, religion does play a role, but so do other things, which I feel like the affirmative team kind of didn't really address that point as well, well enough. I'd like to talk about the second point of clash, which is law. So they stated how laws usually come directly from religions, which, yes, that's true. Some laws in our society have come from Christianity. But we said different religions, especially in this society that we're in today, in New Zealand society, do not exclusively decide our laws, as our laws are ever growing and changing. As the youth grow and develop, their beliefs are different to the maybe the past beliefs, and they will change the laws and stuff to fit their present society. So that's why I believe we've won that point, because I think that we made a good argument on that case. And my last point of clash I'd like to talk about is if not having religion determines what's good or bad in society. So we have talked about how there will be a more inclusive society and more collaboration in society. We actually see today how not having religion fundamentally decide what's generally right or wrong improves society, as people of different religions and stuff can come together under one law, as we stated before, and decide what's right or what's wrong in general, rather than focusing on specific religions, which we have said we are able to have laws that benefit everyone. And coming together with all these points of clash, I believe we have won this debate, and this is why the moot shall fall. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the leaders' reply for the negating team, and to finish off the debate, I'd like to introduce up the leaders' reply for the affirming team.
What we have here is 2 interpretations of emotion. What we have on our side is a bit different to what they have decided on their side. What we tried to explain during this debate was that religion is based on the principles of right and wrong behavior. while while the negating team has tried to has explained that religion, the principles of right and wrong behavior are based on religion, and that is where we've kind of conflicted. That was, I feel, our biggest point of clash here, which led to certain moments such as a few moments where they've mentioned stuff like Al-Qaeda and the ideas on right and wrong behavior, basically proving our point. What I'd like to summarize with is our main points. What I spoke about in my first speech was the main historical context of how religion was principally founded on the ideas of right and wrong and how it built up the foundations of sacred texts and our sacred tradition in religions, in multiple different religions. My second speaker went more in depth into the modern context, into how it affected how the laws that we have in place now are based on rules that were based on religion, the religious principles. We also talked about extremism and how, while their ideas were twisted, it leads to a fundamental idea that there are right and wrong, and there are different interpretations of that. We were never saying that these principles are the same across religion. We were never saying that the people were right in their behavior. We were never saying that people have mind blank. Basically, what we were saying was that religion, the right and wrong principles, are not based on religion. Religion is based on right and wrong principles, and that is why the moot shall stand. Thank you.
Alright, so I'd just like to thank everybody for a good debate, and it was a close but clear debate, and I'd like to give it to JPC. So in this debate, there were two main points of clash. One was a less important point of clash revolving around the purpose of religious texts. And then the second one is how religion is used in our society, and it mostly focused around laws, and there was a bit of stuff around historical use. So firstly, on the less important, the less weighed point of clash, the purpose of text, this was mainly seen around the early parts of the debate. It was mainly about why religious texts were formed and then how it was used. This was like in the purpose of old laws from the affirming side, and how like the Ten Commandments, stuff like this, why it was written for people, all that sort of stuff. What we heard on the negating team was mainly about like the existence of multiple texts and how some of them can contradict each other. But I believe the initial push from the affirming team stood strong. It wasn't pushed too much against, and why we ended up giving that point to the affirming team. And then onto the higher weighed point in this debate was how religion was used in our society. Again, biggest thing from this was around laws, but we see it initially come up in historical context in the older society in affirming 1. We hear it mainly in like how religion was used, and then what that dictated from then on. What this looked like was, again, those old laws being like what people thought was right and wrong and how it was engraved in the first place. And then we see negating come in with the religion mainly like in our day-to-day lives, about like morality and stuff like this, and around the religions kind of contradicting each other, and then that come in. But a lot of these, the main thing on contradiction, it wasn't pushed too hard and was kind of shut down pretty quickly in the debate. And then we see it continue on in the second speakers with modern context, and it's the biggest push, which was in laws. We see two kind of pretty different arguments. Number one, in affirming, which is like the laws originally came from religions, and then like it shifted and keeps shifting. Then what we see in negating is that
things are changing, and a lot of it is due, and the biggest push was a lot of it was due to interpretation, and especially modern interpretation now, which was their biggest push. And I feel like if that was pushed more in the debate, negating would have had a much stronger argument. This idea of like interpretation and how we don't know really what's right and wrong, especially in the past. And then the laws coming in again, which is like the laws based, how instead laws based what is right and wrong, which kind of missed the motion a little bit, but it still pushed back against the points that Fleming was bringing, and it was just kind of continued on in the third speakers. But there wasn't too much to go against the initial push from me of the Fleming team, and that's why I ended up giving the point to a Fleming. So I'd like to, again, congratulations and commiserations. But it was a good debate, and I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. Yeah. So I am the chair. I'll be the chair of this debate. 6-minute speeches, because it's supposed to be 8 minutes to final, or 6 minutes. Obviously, here, POI starting at 1 minute, in 5 minutes. No badgering. It should be around 15 speaking chat. POI, so you can make an opponent. You all know the motion, and be respectful. The motion, all that good stuff. So without further ado, I'd like to start this debate and welcome up the first speaker to the Fleming team.
This house believes that without faith or religion, life has no meaning. First, I'd like to start off by defining the following terms. We define faith and religion as something or a power greater than yourself. And we define meaning in this debate as purpose or reason for existence. The key stakeholders of this debate is obviously humanity. And if we can prove that without religion or faith, there is no meaning, then we win this debate. And so, I'm going to, as first speaker, I'm going to be addressing our 3 main points. Why faith and religion gives meaning quickly, why having no faith and religion means has no meaning, and even if religion is false, how there is still meaning in religion and no meaning without religion. So now to just go on to this, first of all, we are talking about inherent meaning in this debate. In this debate, we're not talking about the idea of how you can find meaning through work or meaning through having a fulfilled relationships or something. That is not the meaning we're talking about in this debate. In this debate, we're talking about meaning as a reason for existence, or a purpose in your life. We're not talking about, under the negating size argument, you are just a cluster of cells and atoms. You're not actually anything. There is no purpose for your existence under their model. You are no different from bacteria and other animals, which we're going to address later in our substandard. So now just on to my first point. Why faith and religion gives you meaning. Into religion, you are created by a divine being. You are created on this earth for a purpose. For example, you can look at Christianity and Catholicism as a whole. You were created by an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving God. There is a reason for your existence. You were made by that. And so, you're meant to do things, for example. You're meant to follow God. You're not meant to sin. And there is a reason why you were created. The earth was created for a reason. We can even look at things like Hinduism. Under Hinduism, there is a cycle of life, and there is a cycle of rebirth. This is, again, meaning. There is purpose for your existence to try and to go up, to achieve good karma and follow your dharma so that you can be enlightened, etc. And that your existence has meaning because you were created by a higher power. So now let's take this to a personal level. Let's say that a person is giving you meaning through knowing this, right? So even if, let's say that religion, for example, is not real, that still has meaning because that person still has that meaning and hope and belief in that religion. They do not simply think that I am just a cluster of cells, there is no purpose to my existence. My existence is a random coincidence. Instead, they think that they were created by an all-loving, all-powerful, all-knowing creator, and that creator created them for a reason, that they are meant to exist, showing how even if that's not real in a sense, there is still intrinsic meaning in it. Now I'd just like to impact that out for a little more, just quickly. So why does this matter? this matters clearly because we need to prove that there has to be meaning in religion in this debate, right? So we've thrown through this that there is meaning in religion through the fact that, one, you were created for a reason, or there is a purpose to your existence. So like Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, like a bunch of different religions in that aspect. And we've also shown that even if all of them are not necessarily true, it still gives meaning and purpose. And so now on to the second point, really. Why having no faith means having no religion. Let's take a step back and have a look at this from the opposing side's perspective. Under the opposing side's perspective, you're just a cluster of cells and atoms that evolved from bacteria and rocks. There was no reason for your creation. Your creation was a random coincidence. There is no reason, no purpose, no meaning. It is just years and years of luck. And then there is this illusion of meaning that the other side may claim to paint. This illusion of meaning in your life, that there is meaning in a sense that there is meaning in having a fulfilled job, or doing a bunch of stuff like that. However, this is not actual meaning. Actual meaning comes through belief in this higher power, belief in this greater thing than yourself, which we are going to show. And now I'm going to present the negating side with a simple question, which I would like them to answer in their substantive speech. I'm asking them to address the question. If someone came up to them and under their side asked them, why should we not just give up on the human race? Why should we just not stop reproducing under their view, where they can have meaning without faith and religion? Answer this question without faith and religion, please. Why should we not just give up on the human race? And the thing is that a negating side cannot answer this question because there is no meaning under their side. We are no different from bacteria. There is nothing that makes us dying out compared to mosquitoes dying out any different. So let's take a look. Under our model, Earth was created for a purpose, and there is a reason to it. Whether that be the Christian God creating the Earth, etc. And if you believe that there is reason to your existence, under their model, the Earth was a random coincidence, and there is no purpose to that. Under our model, humans have a purpose to follow God, to achieve enlightenment, to work towards those things. Under their model, there is no purpose that can be attained because your life is just a random coincidence. There is nothing in your life that actually means anything to an extent, because there's nothing in your life that means anything. There's nothing in your life that means anything because there is no higher creator. There is nothing that inspires you to do things in your life like this. So now quickly I'd just like to go back and take a look at what both sides are saying in this debate. Under their model, you are just a cluster of cells. The Earth was never created and has never been created, and there is no intrinsic value and meaning in life, which we've asked that question which we want them to answer, and under our model there is meaning and purpose. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank our adjudicators for coming today and our audience as well. So, the moot today is that this house believes that without faith or religion, life has no meaning. And we on the negating team strongly believe that this is false. Our affirmative team here defines that meaning is your purpose in life. But they have fundamentally failed to address your meaning of life whilst you are on earth. They have only addressed your meaning before and after life. How is this important when you cannot understand your meaning and your purpose when you are in the moment? And that is what our team will be covering today. I'm Noah, your first speaker, and I'll be covering our understanding and our holistic emphasis on finding meaning. Nina, our second speaker, will give some real-world examples and the real-world importance of finding meaning, and Monique will be mainly focused on rebuttal. Our key theme as the negating team is that faith and religion do aid...
Do I?
No, declined. Faith and religion aid in giving a life meaning, however, they are not exclusive nor the single source. Again, this team defined meaning as being your purpose in life. And to elaborate on that, your purpose in life, your understanding of life, and your drive in life. It is quite narrow to think that faith is the only driver in life. We find meaning holistically, no. For example, the Hawara model, which is pushed both here at school and throughout Aotearoa New Zealand, which emphasises 4 key elements of faith. Your 4 key elements of well-being. Your spiritual well-being, your familial well-being, your mental and your physical well-being. It places emphasis on all 4 of these elements to develop a whole, grounded person that is stable and finds meaning throughout their life, not just reliant on one single source. I find meaning in my life through my family, my friends, even debating here today. To say that I have no faith and I have no meaning, declined, is incorrect. There is meaning throughout life. Faith is not necessary, but it does aid. We're not diminishing the importance of faith. It is just not the single exclusive source as proposed by affirming. Just to focus on a little bit of rebuttal brought in by this team here as well, on the key idea that, yes, meaning is greater than yourself, but you do have a purpose without faith, and that will be brought on and elaborated on by Nina.
PY?
Declined. Again, faith and religion aid in giving life meaning, but they are not exclusive. It is incredibly important, especially in our modern day, which is emphasised not only in our faiths but on social media, that well-being comes from 4 pillars. It is not faith exclusive, and we are not diminishing the importance of it, but it is a necessary tool, and it is incredibly important to be a well-rounded human that is interpreting and understanding yourself and your meaning from various elements.
PY?
Declined. Again, in this world, your meaning is not just your faith. Your meaning is your purpose, your drive. Your drive in this world, which comes from the people around you. It comes from your family. It comes from your friends. It comes from being here, doing what you love. Not what your understanding of where you came from or where you're going to be in the future. Your meaning is your now. It's what you're going to do. It's what you're going to do in the future, how you're going to live your life. We can't see how you can be unsure about what you'll do tomorrow if you have no faith, because frankly, your meaning comes from so many different elements.
PY?
Accepted.
Would the opposing side of the House please like to answer our question? Why should we not just give up on the human race under your side of the motion?
Again, as I mentioned earlier, this will be elaborated on by our second speaker, Nina. Again, meaning is your purpose as was defined by the affirming team, but your purpose in life is so much more than the start and the end. It is your now, it is your life, and having no faith does not mean that you're lost in the darkness, because frankly your meaning is derived from everywhere. And that is why our team here believes strongly that faith should be in your life, but your life is not for faith. It's a holistic understanding. It comes from your social, your physical, your spiritual. All your meaning comes from everywhere, not just your faith. No faith does not mean no meaning, and this is why we believe that the moot shall fall.
To start off with some rebuttal from the first neg speak actually. So if we are so-called to choose our own purpose or our own meaning, then are we to say that you can choose your purpose or your own meaning of life to be whatever you want it to be? Can this not harm others? Can this not harm others, other people? If your meaning is going to be, we can use an example as Hitler, his meaning. Is that to say, is that the right meaning? So each person is allowed to choose their own meaning. But otherwise, if we use this meaning, the purpose, which is faith, which is God, who gives us, or doesn't have to just be the Catholic faith, but using the example of the Catholic faith, we are given commandments to reach a purpose, to reach a place. We have a meaning. Or if we want to use we can use using from samsara to nirvana. There's certain things you do to reach a place. There's a meaning, that is the purpose. Some more rebuttal. If the earth was, so saying that we're supposed to have purpose in the now, supposed to have meaning in the now, but the whole point is the earth happening. In your model was just random luck. You being alive is just random luck. It's just a chance. It's luck. So then it was just a chance that everything happened, chance that you were born, chance that you got to live. So how are you supposed to have purpose in the now if everything else is just luck? It's just luck. And my last part of rebuttal is just living your life really a purpose or a meaning? Is it, if you're just going to live your life out, that's not really a purpose, that's just you going about your ways. There's no purpose or meaning or end goal or destination or something you're trying to achieve in your life. You're just living your life. That's not really purpose or meaning or having things, which shows why the house, our side of the house, saying that without religion, without this faith, you have no meaning, that just proves it even more. Moving on to my first point about so all the benefits of having a meaning and a purpose through faith and religion. An example of this is how, as I said previously, as in the 10 Commandments, you're given these commandments. If you follow these commandments and you do not sin, you do not fall, you reach a place, you reach heaven. This is a purpose. This gives you a meaning in your life, a purpose of your day. When you wake up each day, it gives you a reason to go about your ways. It gives you a purpose. It gives your life meaning, unlike the other side of the house where you're just living your life, just going about with no end goal, no destination that you want to achieve. No, thank you. And because, as my first speaker previously said, that if there is no reason, that if there is no faith, without religion, if there is no meaning, then you are just cells living in, no different to a mosquito or anything else like that. Because using your example, how you're supposed to live in the now, a mosquito is also supposed to live in the now, an ant's supposed to live in the now. They're supposed to live in the now. No, thank you. So by being us humans and having this religion, this faith, we're living for a purpose, for a meaning that is more than just living in the now, living in the present. We're living to get somewhere. Otherwise, if we're living in the now, as I said, we're no different to ants, or we're just cells. Moving on to some more information. In our model, which is we are created in God's image for a reason. We are created for a reason, for a purpose, to get somewhere, to do something in our life, which is through faith, through receiving instructions from God laid out. We have a place to go. We're trying to get to heaven. We follow things to get to heaven. Every day when we wake up, we get out of bed, there is a reason for us doing that. There is something we are trying to achieve. There's something we are trying to follow, rather than just living in the now like all the other, like just cells, or just like ants or mosquitoes. So this is all summed up about why the meaning for our lives is around religion and faith. Because, as I said throughout my speech, we're trying to get somewhere, we're trying to do something. This is through faith, this is through religion. This gives us the meaning, the purpose, which is through what God gave us, rather than using the opposing houses thing, living in the now again, which, as I said again and again, is no different to the other things. just repeating what I've said throughout my speech, is how we are created in God. Earth was created for a reason by God. We are created for a reason by God in God's image, for a purpose, for a meaning in our life. We get this meaning through faith, through religion in God, rather than just being like all the other insects and being just like a bunch of cells if we just live in the now. Thank you.
My name is Nina and I'm the second negating speaker. The affirming team has asked why we should not just give up on the human race without complete faith in religion. To put their weary minds at rest, I will address this throughout my statement. They talk about mosquitoes, bugs, whatnot. I'll leave that to Monique. That's not too much my forte. Faith in life, not life for faith. Faith and religion do aid in life's meaning, however not exclusively so. It's holistic, as Noah, my first speaker, said. Hawora. Not trying to diminish the importance of faith, but it is not the only way to have meaning. Life having meaning is not solely on a grand scale, not solely as going to heaven or going to hell. Life having meaning, there's meaning in the everyday, from the cup of coffee that you pick up in the morning to the sunset you saw at night. And to say that this isn't meaning is wrong. Life, Declined, is so full of meaningful things. Let's just take the example of atheists, people with no religion. Are their lives any less meaningful without faith? Even if they do not see the Lord in the sunset, does that make it any less beautiful? Although their views may differ, they still feel, they still have purpose. People find meaning in the everyday. We can't argue that. In nature, in the serenity, also in the people. Declined. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. The people, the people, the people. Connection and meaning comes from the people you know, the people you love, and the people you will meet. Connections and connecting with people give my life meaning. They give your life meaning. The hug you gave to your mum in the morning before you came gave her life meaning. Declined. Although these may have some part of faith, although these connections you make with people can have some part with faith and religion, it is not exclusively so. I do not want to give up on the race of those that I love. I do have faith, but it is not the sole thing that gets me up in the morning. When my faith wavers, when at times I'm in doubt, or it is not so strong, I have other things to turn to, because there is so much more meaning in my life. I find meaning in the things I partake in. I find meaning in my hockey team. Declined. I find meaning in my family and friends. some of which are here today in the audience. I feel meaning through their love, through their support. When they cheer me on, when they give me hugs, these are people that I surround myself, that fulfill me. I find meaning in art. To stand in front of a landscape or a portrait, to see the colours, the forms, the composition, through not just my own eyes, but through the eyes of those that came before me, through the eyes of the artist. And this touches me. This gives me meaning that I can find without my faith entering the conversation. I do not want to give up on the race of those who create those great things declined. Faith and religion do give meaning, however, not exclusively so. Why should we not just give up on the human race with our complete faith and religion? We shouldn't give up because life is beautiful. We live for the touch of another. We live for our endeavours. We live to create. We live for art. Faith in life, not life for faith. And this is why the moon shall fall.
In this debate, we've seen two models, and one is clearly better than the other. On the opposing side of the House, we've heard that their model for meaning is that we are a cluster of cells on an Earth that was never created or has no reason for being created, that we have no reason for being here, and that we are simply the evolution of bacteria from rocks, that we are similar to a mosquito. There's no difference between a mosquito or us at the inherent meaningful level, which we have defined meaning as in this debate. On the other side of the House, we've got a model for inherent meaning. We're a perfect, omnipresent, all-intelligent God who created the universe to express his divine love for us, has given us a purpose on this earth to build into his kingdom. He has given us a purpose on this earth to build out of the now, out of their system of just now, on an earth that has no reason for being here, to a kingdom which is divine and is created by the all-powerful, all-knowing God, or the person in their religious life. And so for a religious person, when they know that, that is a far more, that is the only model which can provide you meaning. You cannot find meaning knowing that you are just a cluster of cells, that is no reason for being here, that is simply the evolution of rocks and bacteria. And so that's why we asked in our first speaker, what if someone came up to the opposing side and said we should discontinue the human race? Without faith or religion, why is this claim wrong? Now, this was such an important question, and surprisingly it was ignored by the first neg, which is a problem. It shouldn't be, an important question like that should be addressed immediately. But anyway, they responded at second neg by saying they'll give an indirect answer to that question. And I want to highlight some key quotes that I've taken out of their whole speech as kind of, I suppose, indirect answers, you could say. And the first one is, I don't want to give up on the race that I love. And then the next one is, don't give up on the human race because life is beautiful. Now, that is quite unclear, but what I want to say is, this is not true meaning. This is an illusion of meaning. You know, if that has been created due to this modern day experience that we have jobs, we have checklists that we have to do to survive, we have to go and create money, and we've got these massive structures and these wonderful pieces of architecture and massive stadiums and movie theatres and all these things that have created an illusion of meaning. But if we strip it down to the fundamental level, which we have been saying from the beginning of the debate, none of their claims of the here or now, or the hauora, or whatever they have been providing, matter when at the inherent level, you are simply just a cluster of cells, and I've explained it, and I'll get to my model, but I'll take this POI in a sec right now.
Do you think there's no meaning to a whole model of health?
Yes, that's what I'm explaining right now. There is no inherent meaning to a whole order more of health. How can you say focus on the world in the here and now when the world in the here and now was created for no reason and did not actually have a creation? How can you provide meaning out of a system which is based on a world that was created without any reason for the actual creation of that world, under that atheistic worldview? So they have this illusion of meaning that tells them why they might feel that we don't want to give up on the human race, and that question that person comes up and asks them is wrong. But as I've said, when we strip it down to the inherent level, if someone says that and you are simply just a cluster of atoms who have combined to create something which looks like a human, which is a human, and we have all these unique experiences, and yes, we feel each other and we have relationships, but at the end of the day, you are just a cluster of atoms like a mosquito is. You are not something which has been put on here with a soul, with an inherent purpose outside of this earth. You are simply a collection of atoms firing, doing a 1-2, firing when they need to, not firing when they don't. That is not something which is inherently meaningful. We've got an illusion that humans are something under their model, which is great and meaningful, but at the end of the day, if you strip it to its core, it's just simply a cluster of cells. And so you can say life is beautiful or whatever, but there's no difference between a cluster of cells that creates this great human who's tall and who builds these structures and who creates these movies and etc., and a mosquito who is a cluster of atoms who does different things. They may not build movies, but is that what we're going to define the difference between meaning as? Something that goes and creates massive structures and creates politics and stuff, or a mosquito? Is that what we're going to define the difference as? Or we're going to look at our far better, far superior model, which talks about the only way you can actually genuinely find meaning. You cannot find it through a cluster of atoms, no matter how developed those atoms are. You can only find it through something outside of a world, and as we've explained throughout this model, outside of a world which is not correct, outside of a world which is supposedly created for no reason. You have to find it in something that is outside of this world, that has created you out of divine love. And that's what I want to finish with. God created this world out of love. He loved us so much that He gave His only begotten Son to die for this world. And so that is where people find meaning, in the love from God that has created this world, not in a cluster of cells or atoms.
I'd like to thank the Birmingham speaker for their speech, and I'd like to welcome our navigating speaker.
Good morning, everybody. There's been a lot of talk about clusters of cells. If you want to talk biology, let's talk biology. If a life devoid of religion means that we are just a cluster of cells, boy, are we one sophisticated cluster of cells. There's been a lot of discussion about inherent purpose outside of this earth. Our whole argument is that this doesn't encompass our inherent purpose when we were on this earth. So, in level 3 bio, there's this awesome paper called Human Evolution, personal favourite. There's a big emphasis on the study of abstract thought, which has implications for this debate, considering that it talks about meaning regarding cultural evolution. Some of this sophistication in these clusters of cells that we study link to the abstract thought required for religion and spirituality, and we use that to understand how sophisticated their life was, to show the purpose that they had in their life.
However, this abstract thought, this purpose, this wider thinking, this drive to survive also can be seen accepted.
Do you acknowledge the fact that your team has accepted that this debate is about inherent meaning?
I would say that inherent purpose can be seen in lots of different ways. So, sure, our inherent purpose can be seen in our day-to-day life. And, for example, our inherent purpose of some of our Homo neanderthalensis ancestors could have been seen in collaborative hunting and how we nurture and care for others because we have an inherent love for life. Evidence of there being Neanderthals in Western Europe who survived for a very, very long time in their life with a damaged arm. They wouldn't have been able to survive on their own, but the people around them helped them, they cared for them, they ensured that the, although not human race, still survived because of love, because of collaboration, because of the connections we have with people. So that's what I have to say about this talk of us being a cluster of cells without God. Now, this purpose thing. Different ethos, same outcomes, but the meanings of these outcomes are not diminished. Look at Thomas Aquinas, the famous theologian of the Catholic Church. He talked about the pursuit of knowledge and truth, so we'll talk about, use that interchangeably with meaning, through God. Accepted.
Do you think that even if we have advanced to a sophisticated level, this is simply masking our original nature as a cluster of atoms?
Our advanced sophistication of abstract thought, so it thus including religion, is simply masking the fact that we are all a cluster of cells? No. And I'm not going to elaborate on that. So St. Thomas Aquinas talked about the pursuit of truth through God. He was pursuing knowledge through his religious ethos. Many scientists pursue this same truth towards knowledge through a different ethos, without this religious foundation. This aids in social, scientific, and medical development that helps all. They use different ethos, however, they both produce outcomes that uplift mankind. And the meanings of those outcomes, one's not better than the other. They aid everyone. There was mention of a Catholic teaching that we exist to serve God through his religion. We're all made in God's image. And there's nothing wrong with this teaching being how you find your own purpose. There is nothing wrong with you finding your purpose through this Catholic teaching. However, it is not exclusively so, because you can find your purpose on this earth, your purpose to your core. Yes, your inherent purpose through service, even if it's not driven by God. Service shouldn't simply be done because God said so. If a person is doing acts of service without a faith or religious base, does that make those actions any less meaningful? Declined. The affirming team says yes. Sometimes we just see a problem, we see a solution, and we decide to make people's lives better because it's what is right. Faith and religion provide meaning for some people. For others, as our second speaker declined, talked about, it's found through connections with others. Let's look at the case study of Sir Lloyd Gearing, who's proposed that faith for the future involves a church which doesn't actually have any focus on the supernatural. This demonstrates that it's not faith in the supernatural that makes religion important, using Sir Lloyd Gearing's mindset. It's the personal connections and community that religion facilitates, demonstrating that meaning can be found, and to take it as far as Gearing does, should only be found in our connections with others instead of God. Life has meaning, whether you find this meaning from your religion or you find this meaning through your connections or your love for each other, how you care for each other. Life has meaning. There can be faith in life, but we do not live for faith. This is why the moot shall fall.
3-minute speeches. Good afternoon. We are here as the negating team to strongly oppose the affirming team's belief that without faith or religion, life has no meaning. Again, me as your first speaker introduce our key idea that your meaning of life is derived holistically. Faith and religion aid in your meaning of life. However, they are not exclusive and they are not the only source. But I think it's very important to emphasize that this does not mean that we have no faith. We do have faith, but it aids in your meaning and is not the only exclusive source. Deriving meaning exclusively from faith is not reflective of global cultures and the modern world's understanding of holistic well-being. For example, the Hawara model, which incorporates 4 elements of your physical well-being, your spiritual well-being, your mental well-being, your familial well-being. All of these elements combine together to develop a strong, consistent understanding of your meaning that can stand the test of time. For example, I find my meaning through my connections with my family, the love that I have from them, my friends, and the joy that I find from debating here today. My meaning is derived from my life, my faith, everything, not just the past. It is defined by the now, the future, my aspirations. Faith should be in your life, but your life should not just be faith. Our second speaker here, Nina, shared that there is meaning in the everyday, in that cup of coffee, in that sunset, and you can have that meaning without faith. Atheists have that meaning without faith. Why? Because they derive their meaning from those 4 elements. They derive their meaning holistically. They derive a meaning that works for them, that understands their life, that understands their world, and is not based on one single element of faith. Because he tangata. The most important thing in the world is people. It is people and it is people. Your connections with people, the people you talk to, there's people who you speak with, those people, they help develop your faith, but they help develop so many other elements to create one consistent full image of your well-being. We should not give up on what life is beautiful. We live for the touch of one another. We live for our endeavours. We live to create, for art, for culture, not just for our past. And our third speaker here, Monique, brought up this idea that the affirmative team seems to be absolutely obsessed over, that we're just a cluster of cells. If a life devoid of religion means that we are just a cluster of cells, then we are some very, very sophisticated clusters of cells. Meaning has been derived by humans throughout history through evolution. It's been derived by working together. As St. Thomas Aquinas once said, your own ethos derives your own meaning. You work together. You develop a greater meaning. You move forward in humanity. You find your purpose through your actions, your connections, your overall meaning, not just one text. You develop a meaning that is relevant and specific to yourself, and that is why we believe that the moot shall fall.
As the leader of the Affirming House, I've identified three main points of clash in this debate. One very minor one of does religion provide meaning? Can you have meaning without religion? And then what matters here and now, or core meaning, the personal aspect of this. To start off, first of all, at first affirmative, our side brought out the fact that this debate comes down to intrinsic meaning. This debate is not about small aspects of personal life, as we said, and the other side did not reject this definition, but instead this comes back to intrinsic meaning. The idea that you have meaning from this higher power, from this belief in this greater thing than yourself. And so I'd just like to set that clear before I go into the points of clash. So now the first point, does religion provide meaning? This is pretty clear and simple. Our side has said that yes, religion provides meaning. This is through the fact we have a purpose, etc. The other side has accepted this, so this is clear. Now moving on, can you have meaning without religion? The other side has painted, the negating side has painted an argument of that, you can create the sense of meaning without religion, that you can have these aspects of Hawara, or you can enjoy coffee or the sunset. Yet they haven't impacted out any of this. We do not know how you can get meaning through this. They've just said, you can get meaning through having a cup of coffee. You can get meaning through seeing the sunset. This doesn't actually show us how they get meaning through this. Our side completely rejects that because they haven't shown us how they achieve meaning through this. Whereas our side has painted the argument that we achieve meaning through this higher power. We achieve meaning through this belief in God, through this faith. And so we look at that. We can look at Christianity, where we achieve meaning through following God and following Him. We can achieve this through Hinduism, as I said, through the cycle of rebirth and everything. So if we weigh this up, we look at the opposing side who have said that you can achieve meaning through these minor things, yet this doesn't align with how we set the debate up with intrinsic meaning. So this is not only false, but they haven't actually impacted this or shown this at all. Whereas our side has painted the case that meaning comes from religion, it comes from this, and this is the way to do it, and it cannot come through that, which is why we have clearly won that major point of clash. Now on to the second major point of clash. What matters here and now, or what matters core meaning, personal stuff. So our third affirmative seeker asked a POI to the other team. Do you think that if we had advanced to a sophisticated level, this is simply masking for our original nature as a cluster of atoms? And the opposing side simply said no to this. They did not expand on this, clearly showing they cannot respond to this. Under their side of the argument, we are nothing more than a cluster of cells, and that there is nothing more to that. And so if their response to that is simply no, then we have to accept in this debate that yes, under their side we are nothing more than a cluster of cells. There is no intrinsic meaning, as we have shown. They have not shown how there is meaning, and yet we have shown how there is meaning through our side. There is meaning through God. There is meaning through this belief in this greater power. And also just quickly, the opposing side brought up a daring study, a new point 5 minutes into their third speaker, so we're completely disregarding this as that. Just to finish, the negating side has provided no actual substantive argument or impacting to their debate. They haven't said anything. They've just kept repeating the same claims without showing how they actually matter and how they actually come into effect. This debate comes back to inherent meaning, and as defined by the affirmative side, this is achieved only through religion and faith. Thank you all.
You nailed it, Nathan.
I'd like to thank both teams for a good debate, and I'd like to invite both teams to walk down the middle, shake hands, while we go outside and prepare our way.
Thank you very much. Well done. Good job. Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. And a high five. And a high five. Yeah.
Well, that was a very good debate, and I thought it was a very close but clear debate. Of course, there has to be a winner, and I've given the side that won and the winner of the debate competition as a whole to St. John's. So congratulations and commiserations to both sides, but I'd first like to walk through why I thought this. So in this debate, I found two main points of clash. First being, where does meaning come from? And the second being, what does this mean for us? So I'm going to start with what does this mean for us? So what we hear on the affirming side and on both sides is that the outcome for this is we both have happiness and purpose to live, and do as we please. But then additionally, affirming said that neg has none. And this was brought in at first speaker, and it stood still the entire debate. There was some pushback on the negating side, especially in the first and second speaker, but other than that, there wasn't enough reason for me to convince me why that original stand isn't true. There was a lot of additional putting more stuff into the point, but it wasn't enough rebuttal of knocking down the initial claims, saying why that isn't true or isn't important enough, or why you can't get it on your side, for me to want to believe your side more. There was also a lot of assertions on the negating side, especially around the examples and quotes. I couldn't give these credit much because they were asserted and your points were based off of your quotes and examples, when it should be the other way around. You say your points and then use these examples to help me as an adjudicator walk through why I should believe your side and why that is more believable on your side. But that is why I ended up giving that point of clash to the affirming side, and to this first point of clash, which was probably the main focus on the debate, which was, where does meaning actually come from? We hear straight out the bat on the affirming side that we are talking about an inherent meaning, and what this comes from is faith and a reason to live and of a power above. And we hear this impacted and mechanized very well, and why this is not just like this everyday happiness, this everyday purpose of going to work or going to school or like hang with friends, and instead it's a divine reason to live, and also with death. And then again we see some pre-rebuttal on the affirming side, saying that even if you believe the negating argument, you just don't get the same meaning. But what we get on the affirming side is we hear that you get meaning in different forms. It wasn't probably explained if this was like an inherent meaning or just like a regular meaning, but then we do hear in the second negating that this isn't an inherent meaning, and that you can get a meaning in life without having an inherent meaning. And this was very well argued and was definitely should have been the main focus of the debate as a whole. But then in the third negating speech, this was kind of forfeited, as they accepted that the debate was about inherent meaning as a whole, when their side was arguing that you can get meaning without it being inherent, and that is why we gave the point of clash and the entire debate as a whole to the affirming side, and why St. John's won. So,
With this debate now being finished, we are